I don't really use math too much.
Yeah, 2 welcome emails.
Every time I walk in here, one of you is done.
It's Arjun.
Yeah, but it's not always Arjun.
No, but now we're all here ready to start, except for Arjun.
Don't blame Marvin.
I just sent out the one I see.
That was kind of so whatever.
Yeah.
That seems real difficult. A lot of cameras.
Are you selfieing?
Yes, before the round starts.
You should record the round, but entirely with you selfieing it. So just like everything's going on behind you. Just like,
Yay, we're ready to go.
Thanks, Colin.
Happy Shirley.
Is everyone ready?
wait, I'm not ready. No, okay, I am.
Oh, they're not ready, and she's sending Miles something, so we should probably happen.
Oh, okay.
Just save it in the file.
It's there.
Okay, cool.
You guys good?
Yep.
Cool. Advantage one is China, only getting rubbish out of my stomach, show credibility, crush like this, she's over plus, power, hot, sad, Luigi, except for decisions, actual streamers, for not full, he's been used by plants, W, show gas, given to us, essential withdrawal, it's W, to like giving, so he sees Josh, commands, police, described in national law, and TMU, credibility, use Congress, let's deal with which they will show the U.S. respects national courts, not sports, discriminatory law, C, use it, substance, board, the communist, companies, investment, and global financial seats, advice, subscribe, national law, fosters, distrust, encourage other members, seats to follow suit, the justice, and regulation, princess, and which use this chance will dictate the place locked by the future, and creates international precedent, reps this resolution process, Miller 8, the approach describes to be with somebody, necessary precedent, happen, and every tool, the implications are some serious because precedent sets the U.S. as a linchpin in the legitimacy of gas WTO's undermine the credibility system and change the rules. Medics will say this open store for the revenue describe things like U.S. patent and trademark lawsuit, which will cost split start street sanctions, compensation payments, not in fact, internet and Congress should comply with the WTO and repeal the Norwegian. U.S. response to this game destroys our credibility perceived by China as hypocritical manipulation causes parallel non-compliance. Leverage 12. The Chinese have good reason to stop dismissing the nutrition trade case. As any cases I bring before the WTO, the consequence box and acceptable imagine the people's make of China. Why? Trying to play by the rules we know that WTO could approve at least use intellectual property to retaliation for trade practices. The U.S. better blame the season risk fighting global competitors powerful to use for why they too can ignore the rules or stonewall the WTO decision requires a rehaul the wire to show American foot track encourage others and describe pressure trying to impose how they should play by the rules. This affects our credibility in the global marketplace, and China uses WTO DSP as political cover to avoid escalating trade war with the U.S. requires a credible commitment from the U.S. bound nine. Many events that fuel some political fire despite relatively good times. Many expect U.S. trying to trade frictions to get worse. History provides examples of how bad domestic economy increased recognition for politicians start imports Beijing and Washington likely to settle without going through the formal WTO process legal. Not just appeals provide beneficial political over to both sides. Even continuing ongoing disputes will help diffuse protections that emanate from Congress politically hostile to China. Such strategy could lead to tangible signs of Chinese reform progress. As also used to obviously settle the process to the Washington Beijing battle tensions is far from a foregone uncertainty for the process to work with the U.S. and China need to have an underlying long-term commitment to the process. WTO sees some careless mismanagement of the politics could lead to both sides coming to disenfranchise the outcome of serious consequences. WTO needs both the U.S. and China to be confident and invest in the future of the institution. Rising anti-Americanism in China will cause extreme trade war. Chain 14 recent assaults on American business could be a trend that we can do anything while human rights obvious recent attacks on American business will see sustainable signs of weakness of power structure ability to fully control government is purged if she is not in firm control here. This way trying to unify chapters Communist Party senior officers have already done anti-American vengeance. China's political system fighting hard to the back of the distinctive anti-foreign tendency. Enterprises are using clout to gain anti-American for their own benefit. U.S. companies are not facing something worse than trade war. And the DSP is a distinct form of pressure. It's good for relations and offers the CCP political cover, necessary political stability. Castle Voter 13 litigation. We're trying to help placate the American public sector as well as culture legislation for Congress. Cyber revolution for catastrophic for you as Chinese legislation practices legislation for damage to intellectual repulse. WTO litigation spreads the ability to diffuse political tensions. Domestic pressure than China is the great concern to CCP political support. The Chinese government can utilize DSP determinations to plunders, speed up reforms formation. DSP norms can provide the CCP domestic credibility. CCP a stronger trade dispute mechanism. On dedication, DSP advised Washington cloud and political protection relations class U.S. China war gold scene 13. First things first, the pressing danger of crisis when U.S. China relations various senior signing regulations possible to control by themselves in a crisis necessary to open military conflict and splitting bomb to nuclear arms states and full near-term concern events in 2010 East South China sees just mutual military competition lead to U.S. China example beyond the rest. U.S. China crisis may be likely crisis as a competition dividing stability foundation resort to force and crisis escalation pressure will exist maybe casually in crisis compressing the for diplomacy and war with China goes nuclear Whitner 11 all nuclear weapons exist or mean the danger they will be used to creation of U.S. relations with China might end up fighting us an example gathering tensions creating nuclear where there are signs it could nuclear attack immediately slaughter 10 million Americans manual attack horribly sickness and radiation poisoning radioactive debris blot out the sun destroy agriculture creating world of famine generate chaos and destruction. Advantage 2 is banks handling prohibition destroys the dependence of U.S. banking financial service industries. Totally the Ouija would impose wasteful police and on banks and charms and national dependence of U.S. financial institutions which just regulatory regime that offer transparent release economic growth and different source market regulation large negative effect on market entry which leads to negative impacts on trade flows. Difference regulatory burden imposed on financial services companies harmful to the global competitiveness of American banks. Ouija is not transparent to amplify global financial uncertainty. Lack of regulatory transparency directly harms trade financial service uncertainties created by the Ouija may reverberate throughout the global financial system. As zero tolerance approach by U.S. regulators likely to extensive collateral damage to legitimate banking business. One consequence foreign litigation to U.S. banks, a threat of which would discourage American competition in international markets. We diverse to make services on top extensive and expensive mandates on banks. The financial service competitiveness is key to the U.S. economy. Business Roundtable 13 large companies from the bedrock of modern U.S. economy. Largest companies continually engaged abroad to compete. U.S. companies land financial service central tools to keep its operations. Largest banks uniquely positioned delivers critical infrastructure. They have a scale. They also maintain operations in markets around the world. Globally engaged U.S. companies rely on largest banks to meet their financial needs. Analysis based on flush quantitative and qualitative evidence. Globally engaged U.S. companies are critical to the U.S. economy, generating 54% of GDP. Large U.S. banks are likely to become increasingly important as of globally engaged companies in the future, and bigger is always better. Both 13. How big is the global financial system? The U.S. is fleeing from its century total currency 8,000 per person and 1.6 would join to trade today. The U.S. is shrinking no longer even in the top. They look at the 9 largest banks in North America. 5 are Toronto. There's no regional bank. The U.S. is the biggest top 5 Canadian bank. The Bank of China is the biggest. The world neither Canada nor China is tempting to shrink. Only the U.S., UK, and Switzerland are going down the shrinking path. Why care? U.S. corporations are going to have to look overseas more than that to finance large projects. Foreign banks will fear foreign companies, not U.S. operations. U.S. will give positions, dollars, will reserve currency, money, and commodities will cost more. The U.S. will be forced to pay down instead. The U.S. collapse downturn spreads globally. Assassinated. Myth the world can escape a U.S. would not. According to history, the U.S. has had 5 recessions. Other economies, GDP growth also declines. Realities and the globalized economy, only herd economies are truly delinked myth, rising GDP, dropping world economy, the expected dropping U.S. consumer spending myth, growing intra-Asian trade will make up for lost exports causing U.S. slowdown, intra-regional trade reflects shipments of intermediate goods myth. Europe has become less dependent on the U.S. Wall Street's pulled the world's financial markets and rivaled U.S. happy returns remain the single biggest driver. Economic decline guarantees multiple scenarios, nuclear war, insurance, every other impact. Harrison Burroughs sign great depression lessons include harmful effects in democracy, multilateral institutions, potential target conflicts could grow in volatile economic environment, fusion technology will place dangerous capabilities within reach. So conflict could lead to unintended escalation. The proximity nuclear rivals may place focus on preemptively escalating crises over respiratory emergency infections and grows build up regional naval capabilities could lead to increased drivers, counterbalancing cooperation is difficult in a dog-eat-dog world. Diversity organization will go to war. Royal 10 economic decline increase like of external conflict rhythms. The global economy was rising public current prime bloody transition from one permanent leader to the next. Presence of recession if the extent to which international and external conflicts self-reinforce each other. First years just when facing a popular rise being decline, governments have increased incentives to fabricate external military conflicts. Evidence show periods of weak economic reforms are leading to an increase in use of force and independently U.S. economic decline of bold data ensures global warfare lead with auto handling 12. American economic beats under leadership abroad countries that's weakness and wonder about decline countries will take actions that reflect skepticism about America's future. Allies will doubt our commitment. Actions will sense opportunity to be less certain will become more likely. There's an urgent issue restoring U.S. economic strength. Nothing else possible if that progressive foreign policy is not established. And gambling prohibition drastically increases know your customer regulatory cost cap at 10. Agency subsidy scheme. The focus says you have 2 years relationship with the gambling business. The non-exempt participants to foster make this he puts a burden on the first using seeing that money chain coming from outside the U.S. regulation requires non-exempt entities to conduct due diligence and know their customers insurance on false restrictions to transactions. Banks that work with foreign banks, especially foreign banks, that police serve customers and non-exempt entities must know their own customers. No discrimination that impose the great burden and means U.S. banks sever ties to foreign institutions that support gambling. Miller 8, internet gaming is legitimate business. Internet gaming is legal, regulated multinational financial institutions. Later, this legitimate industry, the WeChat U.S. banks severed ties with these institutions. This could have significant impact on most notably banking. The WeChat cannot deter U.S. citizens from utilizing foreign banks. Regulation is creating significant tension between domestic and foreign financial institutions. As U.S. institutions must require the foreign counterparts to not process transactions that may be legal in foreign jurisdiction, terminate the relation with foreign bank does not comply. And that is the root cause of the global trade finance cap. Senate Call 14. Trade finance underpins the global trade system. Even in non-crisis periods, high price and global trade finance can limit domestic firms. The gap between supply and demand remains. KYC compliance requirements put negative pressure on transactions and client relationships. Respondents perceive a shortfall in terminating relationships due to financial crimes. KYC, AML compliance, finance conditions becoming more pronounced across trade top issues for AML, KYC requirements. Markets are not needing to make AML, KYC requirements as a major limit trade finance. Compliance is resource intensive and appears to be impacting access to trade finance. Compatible lack of harmonization between jurisdictions. Regulators could reduce consequences that contribute to trade finance gaps, lower growth and job creation. Trade creates economic disincentives for conflict. Multiple empirical studies, growth will deliver more globalized world utility peace and the number of civil and national wars dropped sharply along with that. Less trade and globalization of hero free trade and globalization of promoted peace in three main ways. First, trade to reinforce democracy. Second, by raising the cost of war nations have war pollution, war breakout, trade is roots of spoils of war generalizations require wealth reproduction, exchange assets cannot be easily spent. Armies of people need to produce. They can provide the peace of freely trading. The goal is harvesting the peaceful fruit of expanding trade. Virtually all conflicts today are civil and guerrilla wars. 1998, 2007, only 3 actual wars were fought from 2004 to 2007. No two nations were at war. Expanding trade and globalization, people playing a major role in world peace. Guards, he came to the conclusion that freedom of trade is significantly decreased public country experience and military econometric analysis found making economies freer, transit to making countries more peaceful. Trade was the most important channel for peace, and the plan is the United States should legalize nearly all online gambling in the United States. Next is solvency, making a definitive federal determination about legality is key. Miller 8 for Congress legalized regulated internet gambling would allow internet gambling organizations that are trafficking U.S. contribute to the U.S. economy to the U.S. markets. The government brings foreign organizations under the jurisdiction of U.S. laws while reaping the benefit of the tax's $15 billion industry. Legalization may be the most viable alternative for controlling negative impacts of gambling. The legalizing internet gambling would have a huge impact on the financial industry, creating the fast-growing industry, and the regulation of U.S. government will allow institutions of rapid financial institutions to gain about $420 million per year in revenue. Legalization would present serious financial benefits to the U.S. government and citizens via tax revenue. Study by the Harvard Medical School found only 1% of internet gamblers have excessive gambling patterns regarding underage gambling technology is available to control this problem. The financial industry has been sound responsible for taking on this fight. Expenses incurred by financial institutions are likely to result in little or no impact on a $15 billion industry that's growing rapidly worldwide. There are other techniques for circumventing the wager. Congress should make the decision legality internet gambling. Congress should legalize and regulate it until Congress makes a defense decision legality. Internet gambling financial institutions will be sat burdened with tax enforcement, which enforcement requirements. Financial institutions will have the ability and resource and inclination to fight the government's losing battle. And prohibition fails. Article 12, Americans gamble on the internet and will continue. Laws to prohibit simply do not work. The only suitable solution is to legalize and effectively regulate internet gambling with common benefits, tax revenue, protecting underage and problem gambling, protecting consumers from fraud and criminal behavior. Many believe it's only a matter of time between legislation is passed. The threshold of the new legislation be budget neutral, makes significant revenue costs and health reform, care reform, and vital government programs. Important programs are being cut. New regulation will help companies expand internet gambling regulations, such as benefits to see land-based casinos. They show how they're millions to engage in internet gambling. Legal operators, no oversight, no regulation, no consumer protections. This right system is well established in both these because money laundering and corruption rate. Legislative Congress also made it a goal to work with foreign nations. One way to help foster criminal behavior is by not regulating.
All right. Cool. So is the U.S. discriminating versus China in trade now?
I don't think so. Not necessarily. It's not really that relevant to the F.
Well, what incentive do they then have to retaliate against the U.S. based on an entirely external issue that doesn't affect them?
It's the issue definitely affects them because it affects DSB credibility. Our argument is that the U.S. and China both elongate trade disputes in the DSB to use as political cover.
If we're using the DSB successfully now, and we're not discriminating against China in trade, why does China care about Antigua? Your bound part is like the Chinese firm, like the U.S. prevented a Chinese firm from purchasing a U.S. oil firm, and then 2007 was beset by product recalls and U.S. import bans related to Chinese exports. That's the political friction. Like, why do they care about a separate issue if the U.S. isn't discriminating against them?
Yeah, sure. So those are examples of ongoing disputes that have not been resolved. China likes those because it lets them look like they're being hard on the U.S. without actually tanking relations. It's kind of a tacit agreement. The difference in this case is that it was resolved and we ignored it. So hardliners in the Chinese government are like, look, this is an ineffective means to pressure the U.S. Right. We should pressure the U.S. via other means, and therefore China is less likely.
But if those disputes are ongoing, if the other disputes that you're talking about are ongoing in the DSB, how can I'm just
because those are not disputes. The U.S. and China both like when disputes are ongoing in the DSB because they don't want to actually use the DSB. It's just a mechanism for political cover. In China, the Xi regime used it to tamp down anti-American factions.
Why would they get that up?
Because if the U.S.
Because like people in China would be like, oh, government, we can't trust the U.S. Look at this Antigua dispute.
Our Levick evidence is really good on this question that if the U.S. doesn't comply with the DSB, it causes parallel non-compliance in China, and the Xi regime can't tap down their internal version of the Tea Party, which is trying to do anti-American.
Okay, I was actually about to ask about that kind of national internal link. Your Chang card says that Xi's continuing purge indicates that infighting could get worse if targeted elements, especially the youth league, strike back. If Xi is not in firm control in Beijing, he might try to unify factions within the Communist Party. This evidence indicates that domestic political instability in China leads to anti-American anti-American
I mean,
sentiment.
I guess the youth leaders are a thing. They don't cause factions within the internal
You-
CCPR.
The part about your evidence that says they'll get
Yeah.
anti-American is literally in this context.
The reason why she is able to tamp that down is because he's able to say, I am being anti-American without harming relations. The
Okay,
DSP
what
is
now? What part of the
agreed
evidence
upon as a
establishes that?
mechanism
What
of-
part of the evidence
I think
establishes
that's
that?
like Castle-Foder, Bound, Levick, which are all about the DSP.
No,
and
you're
what
I'm talking about your
China
Chang
is.
evidence, though. It's
And the
clearly
Chang
about
evidence is about how anti-American factions are gaining power in the CCP now and doing purges
couple more questions.
against
real quick.
U.S. businesses
Couple more
or
questions.
attacks.
Why didn't the 08 crisis cause like Harrison Burroughs?
No, I think our evidence is pretty good that it's based on A, the competitiveness of U.S. banks vis-a-vis foreign banks. Our BOVE evidence indicates we're on the brink now. U.S. banks are losing out to other banks. That crashed in 2013.
I'm talking about
Our
like how
trade
much does the
accounting is
economy have
based
to
on
decline?
trade finance volumes.
How much does the
I'm
economy
not
have
gonna
to
give you
decline for
a
your impact?
number.
No, so
But-
it's a probabilistic argument. Just
Yeah.
because, like, if it raises the probability to 90%, just because it didn't happen last time, doesn't mean it's not immensely more likely to happen this time.
So was the 08
We're
collapse?
done. Do you
Well,
want to take that?
yeah, I'll take 1 second, bro. Was the 08 collapse worse than the one you
I
prevented?
don't know, but it certainly doesn't it doesn't falsify the claim that deflationary theory is usually true.
952.
No argument is deterministic.
Okay, she'll just send two. Okay, 5. 9.
One second.
Yeah.
Oh, is it?
Okay. 5. China, and then.
China banks.
Yeah.
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 Cool.
Critique online gambling represents the commodification of risk by the state of neoliberal tools, security, caused extinction, and mass structural violence, young intent, and gambling application of scientific engagement, chance, organizations, move construction, risk, that risk, the axiom of modernity, the regulation has been accompanied by focus on chance, intervention, private studies, divisional and gambling, the health of creating economic abuse has been ignored, the gambling, the form of commodity fetish, facilitated by remote communication, e.g. the internet states involves regular project, the affirmative, this is crucial to open up individual space for resistance against security, burning to there is a crucial political opening within politics and power, is most sector exorbitant creates important base for reasons we can challenge the way the institutions point language point, draw subject into their web, this is necessary, seriously, Christians may be able to escape the discourse of positive influence of violence, discourse of dissent, all except the paper states, forced domination of previous seen invisibility, power must be refused by matches for like that, return to never the same, politics, DA, Iran deals coming, Obama will hold off commercial efforts to derail negotiations with PC, Skeagall, Collinson, 11-12 negotiations quickly, approaching deadline to help agreement if peace, Iran, before the deal, been rising new sanctions, tower conference deal will come, new sanctions would have been policy, Obama, veto legislation, agreement on homes and goes to veto majority forces down, there would be enough to chance to veto the numbers are cutting, expect Iran, most specter fierce battle, the hard fight, but the president will win, the plan devastates PC, C13, the G response to online gambling, mirror, failed attempt for litigation, past these fault lines from the U.S. gambling plus that no regulatory in Washington, not the way the absence of any capital be gained that we've lost, appear to endorsing not gambling as national policy regulation plan, read notes, the votes on exists, PC to hold off a veto-proof majority, breach chapter 11, Obama could veto efforts, but overrides with the possibility of putting them undecided Republicans to be available, be on the lot of energy, destroying a deal, Obama will have to fight very hard to fund the administration's top priorities to be one of the biggest legislative developments last few years, negotiation, cost nuclear war, Stevens 13 negotiation with makes serious for the talking to Obama, with Zephyr, Saudi, Turkey, and regime, and equal club, not both be shattered, would draw Israel into a pyramid nuclear strike, program, but not ended the vast community hope for that relaxation of sanctions Iran with judgment and international capability. Iran now leadership is prepared to talk next up is the regulatory autonomy DA. The gambling ban is legally enabled by the U.S. clarifying its commitments under GATS to exclude gambling market access. The plan reversed that. Drake 13 Talabani found out U.S. commitments to permit gambling. You strongly dispute argument. The U.S. domestic policy against gambling and should face except regulate gambling. U.S. to amend the access to exclude gambling amendments or provision of the GATS or require a member to provide compensation to U.S. reach agreements and other members who requested. But Antigua domestic regulatory economy is key to prevent forced liberalization of water services. Impacts extinction debates tonight. The liberalization of water services results in entry of private property. Participation private sector missions. Provision away from interest in poverty, those unable to play with water. Essentially, human survival, collective benefit. Water really leads governments to subsidized services, government strong general obligation, trivial obligation, universal water services, liberalization has the potential to place basic services and level trade laws, increasing quality between foreign local companies, providing carbon, additional right failure, assess water service breach, regulation gets potential limit directive for government for replaceable obligation, the regulatory measure be discriminatory public gas members, the overarching regulation comply with the service on money laws, water service gas is only considered handle cases, only one U.S. gambling has been considered in the appellate level, the AP found that the U.S. made a commitment even on a bureau committee that adopts central product cost based findings the U.S. gambling for the interest regarding application gas and member legislation of the first state measure will be held valid any other states following water article act MME back to prevent non-distributed legislation protecting water access. However, the inclusion of gambling within the U.S. commitment demonstrates uncertainty as the scope of the commitment will be determined by dispute settlement. The potential unintended liberalization supported by the example of U.S. gambling decision where the content of U.S. commitment was determined by the AD rather than the U.S. limited law uncertainty may lead members to require liberalized service area to unintended effect. Next off is the Bitcoin DA online gambling restrictions limit Bitcoin to go to legitimate now plan reverse that paid 14 Bitcoin this morning. So that's regulation having to find who either of Bitcoin's barely come to curiosity gambling with 6% Bitcoin transactions is absolutely revolutionary. The courts have been unclear about the anti-gambling ambiguities enough to the sentence needs separate growth. Becoming a fair computers dynamic carries illicit perception about it doesn't log gambling Bitcoin tells us we can't have in Bitcoin causes lone wolf terrorism, anti-loaning, anti-money laundering regs cannot solve it, which will be the add-on they read in the 2AC chapter 13 Bitcoin poses unique challenges 19 money laundering statutes require that there actually shipments cash functions in Bitcoin grounds to remove risk in money laundering Bitcoin and big security law enforcement listed by removing the possibility of detection errors cells of lone wolf carbon parts CT states working for to remove and logistics money when they're making useful law would force banks to reject Bitcoin transactions. Lone wolves use WMD extinction Act 14. Advances from synthetic biology, open source to commercialization of weapons, and helps increase availability with communities and hospital and technological part, but technological quality time false back, the college party, like the same country got the people and individual will have to increase this will reach culmination ability one to declare war on the world of single individual stop taxes relying on their own resources, no countermeasure in place, multiple games of WMD attack will use to disruption, action, demonstrate motivation, capability to constitute genuine tech. Next off is the counterplan text. The United States should amend the Interstate Horse Racing Act to prohibit all internet gambling on horse racing, amend the Wire Act to prohibit all forms of internet gambling, including but not limited to reversing the DOJ's 2011 memorandum and implementing penalties on individual bettors, clarify that this ban is meant to eliminate the public moral harms of online gambling and enact provisions on the Payment System Protection Act of 2008 and propose, negotiate, and ratify an international convention governing regulation of online gambling. Convention should respect different national approaches to the legality and regulation of online gambling, mandate the use of geolocation technology, and include protocols for the provision of enforcement assistance between parties, banning ends of WTO dispute, universal ban, solves discrimination, Rosenpipe, the little thinking of IHN used to be able to be compliant with WTO obligations, WTO held the federal laws to the and international when necessary, said the U.S. has established connections between rural gambling and dangerous public. The U.S. defended link between money laundering and cannot discriminate between foreigners. The IHA allows betting on horse races by computers in limited states in the U.S. Foreign operators exclude the OW, discrimination W held the U.S. not apply prohibition on rural racing horse races, non-discriminatory solution is easy. The U.S. approved all internet gambling foreign investing. The counterplan solves bank compliance issues. UCG 8, the payment protection system would direct Treasury into conversation with the AG to grant foreign policy to find more kinds of gambling on hotline, make it possible for the U.S. financial industry to comply with the ban and response concerns. Raised by financial services industry about the burden of ambiguity rules of the usual bill would appoint administration law justifying unlawful gambling conducting economic impacts of the cost of compliance banks doing right things from revenues companies and jobs and not gambling police representative of financial industry pledge to support the amendment made essential improvements to deeply flawed law case.
Okay, actually, can you read another point though, CD?
Okay.
I just see home.
The United States should pay annual compensation to the nation of Antigua and Barbuda for its online gambling, including but not limited to the amount specified by the WTO. Case. Non-compliance is inevitable. Against the 13 U.S. policies have been subject to WTO rules more than on the government. U.S. Marines have compliance with substance conformance of origin labor requirement to be processed of environment and non-compliance continues. We only have to win one all cause to beat the entire advantage level 12 on ongoing disputes of prohibition of U.S. cross-border gambling services. U.S. not the U.S. makes a high-minded towards compliance via aggressive subtle consequences of hypocrisy or unacceptable law. Only one instance of non-compliance is needed to expose such hypocrisy. No impact of non-compliance on gambling due 12. The Chinese government may try to negotiate with trade partners to U.S. and gambling by offering additional market access. China may accept the WTO sanctions even follow where the country policies conduct with non-compliance is not a stigma in itself. There has been a long consensus in trade community that it is possible for agencies with WTO may not be able to send that complete compliance may be impossible. No trade or credit spill over. Variance in non-withdrawal and academic commitment false damage to U.S. reputation. Decisions moving on to use friendly statements are flawed. The U.S. often fails to comply with minimal repression. U.S. blatantly discard and manipulate and try to use small face stronger international reactions been limited to 8 workers. U.S. region settlements all but where domestic protest means anti-Americanism in China is never the prospects of great on that no China trade disputes or escalation actions involved. It should be not expected for produce friction between U.S. and China, but the relationship is not centered on both governments and protection sense, but in the defensible unlike free for all that are often trade terms have been prosecuted. Trade wars don't escalate and trade disputes even if some sense between decimal and all that kind of comes not clear this would have any application or state military constitutes carries not like the escalating military confrontations love the trade ever become shooting wars. Chinese leaders don't want war. Goldstein 11 normally is China a long way, but being able to go towards the United States not be why they want to build conflict would be the basis to repeat China global posture and change prosperity. China has been hands down the peaceful great power. The military has not fired a single shot 25 years. Leaders are struggling to hold in check nationalism. Other advantages. Trade is irrelevant for war. Barbarian 13 has independence effect war. Taking people strong threats for the army. Economic factors have little family. Religious engaged war. The defense of people for population in the trade. Right to path space. Even after strong factor, democracy alliance, high support, government system, most into trade fails to turn complicated independence. Little influence on war. The even economic climate does not cause war. Either jerks along wars. The economic deals with national one nature real hard to believe the conflict not great enough to the community financial even through active version trade levels which is hard to see how leaders mass spending will believe that country would prosper attacking us and often fly. The fact that we've seen a drawback in time of international forces solution shows that even bad times are very confident not make war thinkable growth causes war trainer into if we remain determined to increase on living standards more guaranteed the increasing conflict more and have people probably less assured less be escalating conflict over material sure to go war so we fought over economic good see war for increased normal habits economy or wars occur regularly over economic siege wars inevitable results of intense growth strong determined expansion war wars can be seen in imperial gravity research create a situation where France long as boundary managed to life forces carry into major power if we want to allies we prepare for extinction. What? Okay, short-term collapse of the global economy is the only way to avoid catastrophic warming delay. Launching emissions to 13. The difference between industrial against efficiency and neutral sometimes when production emissions without power on the economy age production and possible conduction as the natural system emissions plots of the economy is made safe humanity by soon rather than live the worst breath or second depression made the best economic growth certainly will come in the slowly all or glass for our fragile make rapid more like capacity during mass emissions from the way has been reduced let's say on the global system has been weakened the possible way to climate change will force humanity force extreme severe global climate class should not GGG to reversing climate change growth unsustainable and causes extinction. Sherman and tech doesn't solve Sherman. 700 scientists pronounce that humanity's peril from environmental damage refused. Is off active technology disregards the issue if humanity had the ecological footprint of the U.S. 3 pounds would be needed. Ecological service not see both economies to use more land, water, forest, saturation, habitat, and not retrieve that ecological service. There's no future in growth. Sustainable growth is an absolute moron. Pollution, society, and professional growth, even somewhere nearly around we have already seen cast here at the hotspot. 10 seconds. You want me to read anything else? Extinction chased down 96 offspring in the 2020 season predicts world war. This is when wars occurred in the past. Competition will coincide multiple distinct settlement rival will be disaster free not survive. War tracks close to the economic cycle of the past 500 years. Mark that past 500 years.
Says the K in the counterplan.
This goes logical for the next.
Can you kick individual planks?
Nope.
No? Okay. Is the alternative in the world's alternative, can you legalize online gambling?
Nope.
Nope. Great. What evidence do you have that Iran would use nukes even if the deal fails?
It's about Israel striking Iran.
So the internal link is Israel strike. Where does that card say Israel will definitely strike without a deal?
So I don't want to say it's only Israel strike because we're going to say in the one in R that it's about non-prolif in the region. So Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Egypt, and Israel all would rapidly proliferate as a result of the deal failure.
So it's Israel strike and Iran nukes people and everyone proliferates.
Yeah.
All because the deal doesn't pass.
Yeah.
Cool. International Convention plank of the counterplan. What solvency evidence do you have for this? What countries would get on
It's gonna be
board?
to like solve add-ons you're reading, which I think.
That doesn't really answer my question. Where is the solvency for this plank of the counterplan?
We'll read some in the blog.
You have solvency evidence for
Yeah,
creating an
we-
international convention? Okay.
Yes.
We send reading.
I look forward to
Yeah.
seeing it.
Okay.
What countries would join the convention?
No, you can just take these questions.
Like European countries, all countries that want to ban gambling. The good thing about
Like
the
the
convention is
UK
that
legalizes
the good thing-
gambling, so why would they join
the
it?
good thing about the convention is that it allows states that want to legalize gambling to actually get in on it to talk about how to create a coherent
Yeah,
regulatory
and
model.
what states would want to join? I guess you don't have evidence.
There
because you
are
haven't
states,
had it.
there are like
Counterplan.
states that
So,
want to
like,
prohibit gambling and states that want gambling.
So
They can
everyone
both
in
come
the
together.
world, every country in the world who either wants to
Many,
legalize. or
probably
prohibit-
not Iran.
Probably not Iran.
Yeah.
Okay, no, good to know. Lone wolf terrorism.
Yeah.
How do you solve the ones that don't use Bitcoin?
Our evidence says the propensity for the ones without Bitcoin to attack.
So like the guy who attacked the Canadian Parliament,
Yeah,
he used
those-
Bitcoin.
They're not going to be able to get one.
Those, like without Bitcoin funding, they don't have the propensity to initiate a large
So
scale.
I guess,
like
like,
there was
what-
like the Boston Marathon bomber was technically a lone wolf, but he didn't use Bitcoin.
Sure. So can you give me an example of a lone wolf that has used Bitcoin to get a WMD?
Obviously, that hasn't fully occurred yet. That's what our propensity for a link.
So
proves.
where are you getting information on them getting Bitcoin if the ones that get Bitcoin haven't acted on it yet because they haven't
Well, our
used
evidence says
Like,
that the
where does-
restriction on online gambling in the school is what's preventing them from being able to robustly access Bitcoin now. Like,
So as
that's
soon
the
as the
whole
plan
thing.
happens, every wannabe lone wolf
Not
terrorist
every, it's not like
gets
snap, they're
Bitcoin.
gonna get like immediately,
I mean,
it's a
yeah,
huge
okay.
stream of revenue that we say is untraceable because that's what Bitcoin allows
Yeah,
them to
no,
do.
I mean, I'm
And
aware
they're
of what
like
Bitcoin
more
is.
likely able to do that in a world where
Yeah, yeah.
gambling is legalized.
Where do they get the WMD from?
Our app's like, Ackerman's just like
Ackerman
like
evidence
anyone
is,
can just like
pretty
find
hacky,
it. Yeah, I mean like if you have like basic scientist
Anyone can just
they're like
find
like
it.
scientist expertise. Like he's literally like all you need is like grad student
Yeah, but if it's a
expertise in
lone
chemistry
wolf,
or
they
biology.
can't like use anyone else.
That's the
Right,
point
that's
though.
lone wolf
Lone wolf
terrorism.
could literally be like a graduate
So
student.
the
in
lone wolf
biology or
has to be like
chemistry.
the next Unabomber, is that correct?
I mean, maybe like that's not like the
Well,
only
where do they
possible
get?
lone wolf.
Sure. Okay. Where
I
do
mean,
they
our
get?
ads like I can go
This
through
is
the
just
card if
making
you
less and
want.
less sense. Where do they get the material from for
Our-
the WMD?
Our card just like they can go to like loose nuclear sites as well as
Where
bioweapons.
loose nuclear sites are just sitting around everywhere.
Like all throughout Central Asia, are you kidding me? The Soviet
All
Union
throughout
literally came
Central
out and
Asia,
said we
that's
lost
true.
multiple nuclear suitcases after its collapse.
Okay, right.
Statement from the Is it on? Oh, I can hear it.
So 40. I thought you were so 33. The order is going to be China, banks, the counter plan, the water DA, the Bitcoin DA, politics, the critique.
You said it one time. You said that one time.
China, banks, counter plan, water, Bitcoin, politics. Okay. Everyone good?
political pressure, short decision times, ensure escalation, non-compliance, not inevitable. We resolve the continuity, which is the only thing. There haven't struck big gaps. It's unique. That's condiments. The compliance is also reverse causal because it shows the U.S. is compliant. They would listen together. Perception of evidence about the gambling case as China. You uniquely proceeded to vote will concede that there's no actual spillover to enforcing the GATS or the WTO, which takes out the link to the water, just out the wood, not be a trade war, and that's our argument. But their argument says the reason why there wouldn't be a trade war is globalization, which impacts the DDEV argument is the anti-Americanism is the actual party, which makes the GDP government being able to tap down uniquely keep China's current leaders don't want war, but the new ones would. Now the trade advantage and enable to say effective signaling reduces the cost of the alternatives to war and raises the cost of war means nobody goes to Brazil 11 cents and economic action. Better study reason for an economic decline would cause the war. We have a rigorous theory of motivation of the war. 11 cents of pure blood and trade does solve war, even if it's a proxy for other things. The policies are so good. There is an increased probability for war, even if it didn't go to war. The last time trade revenues impacted by their own trade war items. There's no impact to warming. I assume 10 most sections don't be commented the humans, even though we're speaking scenarios still by PCC don't foresee human extinction of these scenarios to make sure don't keep your events and not catastrophic scenarios program overnight. Contact rights, capital advice, and see if there was going to come on. It's not going to be killed. Humanity, typical points never land here. Unlike competition, reversal according to 7 said the damage will be system the mission product control turned off for mission once up global essentially reversal change. Will last more than 10,000 years. Oceans are stuck in ecstasy, carbon dioxide, you will eventually start coming down the ocean. No check, not yet. Oh, that country was collapsed to be breakdown system, keep it so the line, masturbation war. This alone gives enough reason to find out speech of law. Becoming civilization, the law is however hard we call. We work on the land, another blow survive this summer. The people think to monopolize resources don't likely be most managed to match the good. We're gonna have the voluntary failure humans and industrial civilization of collapse is on because they're not fighting to stay close and fighting to break collapse and repeat actually the mindset has never happened, which means it's always empirically denied. Also, even if it doesn't lead to war, diversionary theory still means that there wouldn't be any mindset that's sustainable. Communist for team with the most economic systems economical to often their pay attention to goods I think about manufacturing and research action with advanced economy so it's actually a much older until a few centuries ago economic government all this you have to valuable fertility decline the red development still from the by people there's the fertility stage decline of economic growth and change current education and skill and growth skill work to have a transport the fact that economic growth well get the rapid chase doesn't cite any studies for K waves, which means it's probably wrong. DF is wrong. Starts in 14 and civilization about which are from similar lifestyles can entering more different choice. It's not sure paradox scenarios next words one prediction peak or nearly always one day. Underestimate develop new technology, new resources, new attractions, discovery 10, fetching fast react the target and test laid on lossy journalist aircraft space and deeply flow bonus growth thinking self-serving romanticizing poverty future will need ongoing innovation, capital permutation, new growth, permutation, the capital doesn't solve cooperation, only competitive which means doesn't solve the economy, doesn't solve president or WTO Ross line. Oh wait, the WTO shows he sees the opportunity to manifest the authority must continue but certain but not keep selecting develop countries to go together my counters depend on member 10 the country may draw such roasting blockchains like the US use for time some restrictions about the border policy implication which are times essentially given global training or thus follow what's or the time the US is buying rights for international law has been interpretations of law in US willing to spend self-protection under WTO system on the risk to withdraw the sanction under adoption by the FD the wrong jury withdraw to grab many as the manipulation of who's gives you try to change the rules stop the rules obviously links to the politics system because it would be a controversial new law individual ban is unenforceable lever and drop the reason that the effectiveness of those given fact conspective or invaded and legislative given sense and important governments invade section the uncertainty about the force and influence government decision technology uncertainty IP address not anything location many ways the right tracking the price service for that traffic use proxy IP unless websites will track criminals websites not care will contribute addiction also influence process less than special force practices or to real customers location as far many negative expectation get discharged the voting issue multiple kind of excuse the 2EC destroys argument responsibility and portable skills one condo and one business both solves your offense W10 now the water dis W2 cried now an inevitable Kumar and all 1113 and the United States between on way and away the same part like WTO the deal transfer comes to straight by not push through reform with the further negotiation and policy the WTO Jesus Christ now 20 years history put the WTO future that the correct represents significance of the agreements get the policy pact and the new balance of our trade back on track there is no water privatization deal right now which means the DSM is irrelevant no water worth and some direct companies so the directly cooperation to play tensions and have the water international survey parent show that's creative to prevent the diplomacy most families negotiate water sharing agreements what's cooperative regimes are self-sharing and personal design among other otherwise hostile repairs even the confrontation of new issues no privatization WTO no statement sources scarcely WTO is not every water GSS does not require privatization deregulation service to protect water distribution to public health social welfare fully general no WTO members maintain some of the monopoly public numbers of members to so make gas commitments to water privatization zero sinking equal land government we agree to the right to water regular work like WTO members are not done so Bitcoin just had they can see the gambling is key to it will straight turn on and gambling prohibition punches based on that 3 2 the farm money is Bitcoin gambling revolution type of gambling cash on chips money because currency jobs go out there make conventional money some forms gambling but several times space B2B technology regulation like you and that's like cryptocurrency players supported by the use back across the pyramid bullying entrepreneurs have demand shoes cryptocurrency is gambling it's like there are evidences that this natural illegal sites are driving Bitcoin currency which means it's only we can win a unique link to gambling prohibition what driving growth that's there are team Bitcoin showing the present list that's going to grow here's control things long as you see the list or list activities going to continue to grow transactions made by Bitcoin now any sort of bank the anonymous decentralized nature bank Bitcoin's been a particularly valuable new currency game the government has to freeze your account Bitcoin's been able to go like it's managed to get run some laws to ban online gambling business not government local government's probably never enough to ban the currency outright terrorism obviously turns DDEV anyway now politics yeah No Israel strike has American control despite no speculation more right. The just fairly says the next time to repeat. Saturday around is the world place for Israel sadly. You have to be mentioned Israel was lost to attack the facilities beside towns Israeli aircraft missile flight through 4 hours. Also, everything's getting to Jordan around from Iraqi space politically does first Iraqi used to not be possible without the knowledge and the US Israel to this way. Great receive how your nuclear Iran solves its building walls and top nuclear vaccine and so civilian competition one nuclear Iran to use more possibly restore civilian Middle East language. It's typical major crimes the rights rules nuclear monopoly long field facilities down around has contributed to the crisis no escalation yelp. It doesn't work for regional security threats they work time terrorists actually tell United Great Council and divide not like control to the arms of almost anything in the Middle East much more lose the game from Toronto Great Council to China Russia was possible upon other routes out. Short competition no deal Washington Post 10 27 Iran vaccine to be solved Iran's public refugee and deal there will be acceptable less Iran like no banana back steps of is Patrick Iran will lie Bolton 13 Iran full of records ignoring the commitment like that nuclear demonstration on space can't be trusted but continue recently just believe today such only if credibility counts for nothing with Iran's commitment hold any wait no PC Baker and Davis 11-13 Obama commercial probably due to the industrial that was the consensus no one seems to follow on these like muscles immigration conversation even if I have to fact to reinforce Obama's desire to so Obama's act of Republicans increase divine that she said like talk order with Tennessee by press waste low comprehensively ignored America voters also said Keystone vote is coming Bloomberg policy Lord and 12 Bureau said populist obviously important issue seems to be how my press it seems like that's like some difference is as much as for like to be honest something Obama said measuring few constant Keystone should be allowed to progress only like thousands of actors from happy 11 also used to be online only influence on pushing agenda about online gaming and online gambling will make it through Congress President Obama told his final sin read it seems like a lot before veto Alice's backlashing on Israel Iraq and Temperature 11-9 Nelson said it's actually scratch that card they're like softly GOP shift for gambling Mahaffey 11 Reese position makes it damage on line less likely the opposition case may be the vote Republican government president over key gambling game states Nevada New Jersey North South Dakota Iowa Republicans no longer stand to be being opposed to online gambling McConnell is from Kentucky home to racing into the internet if racing industry passes this is 5 online lottery tickets illegal in Georgia Illinois Minnesota and New York actually we will say that Adelson 90 Rothberg and Hamburger 11 Adelson say that they gained enormous political power they intend to accept the power for more hawkish portion of the Middle East administration not been tough okay permutation do both, permutation do the cane, all non-competitive parts of the alternative. They obviously don't have a transition that was all the DCAP stuff exclusive. The framework, planner, competitive policy, abstract exclusive, idealized, proposed, straight off, essential, to your own political reality, do need their teams to structure ontology, intellectual, limited effects, going too far, the business plan, the theories, the material, general enough communities close to disagree, failure, think about policy, the space, the environment, be difficulty, the material could just be your ontological and commensal reality, and skip the unlike myself, hopefully, virtual arguments are actually employing this ontology arguments are something answer the question was to be done this with advocates are doing when they come to one side, the two impacts of political structure, and she plays the other much of the focus to deconstruct various ideas there. It's just to do with one practical problems of the control practical theory during the gender and planetary problems and rejecting the WTO failed flex adoption of alternatives fell Wilson. One thing the WTO should be abolished simple failing to prevent the comprehensive alternative international deal approaches to actually be a naive or traditional alternatives to progressive market first not progressive vision of globalism protection against free trade began to approach narrow minded contingency about the UN or WTO taking up the word becomes difficult in the argument international trade or is it true of the potential progressive WTO action will against US progressive foods and not against trade they can also get the list of the US is not on free trade the US is king corporate free trade ought to be a progressive position one five progressive seek to oppose free trade and customer meanings already lost the argument, already answered the environment argument, and structural violence obviously to diffuse for them to solve value is determined individually, which means they don't solve that anyway. DSP is the key to rethinking the whole growth. Vibrations for governing war, trying to think about war, trying to get similar without round everything for its gradual decay. The process of the remains critical as vibrating economy with the disputes on the market, trade wars, today, every darling, the system to play by blaming globals, trade for the problems unique to past generations coming after wars two, trade wars being the modern multilateral structure. We are not on the great historical turning point. Well, I guess I'll just read another card here. Elites are key. Turkey 11 is time to move to the construction of Bible church important emphasis, not because all church is necessarily going to be better than or redemption is possibly was the purpose of critical theory, modern philosophical reflection around something alone engagement takes place because this way environment favours extension deep listen speak by critical and not facilitate any real political we would discuss surrender theory use of challenge gold structure paradise domination stop the domination. Also, we solve money laundering. That's a conceded claim in the 1AC evidence that leads to terrorism. That's also in the 1AC evidence. That obviously is a massive thing that we also solve for terrorism. Yeah.
Okay. The case, why would China be prone to lash out now, given the precedent is over 10 years old?
Sorry.
Why is China likely to lash out
The
now?
precedent is not over. Okay. There's a distinction between the dispute happening and us violating the WTO. China doesn't give a shit about that.
From violating, sure.
It's not 7 years old. It's 2 years old. No,
Okay.
the cross-determination decision.
When are they going to lash out? That's the question.
our China evidence says over the past year, radicals have been gaining power and she has been constructing purges. There's only so long that the purges can tamp them down.
Bound is from 2009. It says that many expect events
Yeah,
that
it
fuel
said
the
that's-
fire, expect things to get worse.
No,
5 years of peace.
It's
Since
no,
then,
the
like,
first paragraph of that evidence is like for 20 years things have been adding fuel to the fire, but relations have always been
How do you
okay
explain the
because
last
the
5
DSB
years?
tamps down.
like from that bound evidence.
Again, not 5 years, 2 years.
No,
Or-
bound is from 2009. You
Again,
cannot possibly say that with your uniqueness argument for your
that evidence doesn't make a predictive claim that
It does. It's
lasts
like China has
forever.
already added fuel to the fire. Okay.
Yeah, the
Why-
fuel to the fire quote is about things
Why is
testing
this economic-
relations over
that's
20
what I
years,
move on to.
and
Why
the
is
DSB
this
can
economic
resolve
collapse
it.
different than 2008?
Huh?
Why is this economic collapse different?
You're not
than
going to get us
2008?
with the reverse pit of doom again. I said diversionary theory is a probabilistic
No, I'm
claim.
wondering why you escalate to nuke war. Like to win your
Diversionary
impact.
theory is a probabilistic claim.
Yeah.
It increases the probability of war. Just because 08 did not cause it does not mean it doesn't massively increase the probability.
No,
of
I'm
it
just curious, like
happening
what the
this time.
threshold
You have
is.
one
to determine trade.
counterexample.
No, what's the differentiation between 08
I
and
don't
this
think
crisis?
there is a differentiation.
Okay,
But I do
so
think
your
08, the
impact-
Asian crisis,
yeah, yeah.
and all of
So your
the other
impact
ones
is 08 crisis right now. The level of magnitude of the impact
for
is
the
08 crisis.
economic collapse
Okay,
impact
cool.
on that.
Um,
Yeah, sure.
The global. So you read
One counterexample does not falsify
why
a
why
theory.
is cotton not a sufficient violation?
Huh?
Why is
Cotton
cotton?
got, I made the argument cotton got resolved like last month. If you
Did
read
you
a
read
card,
up on that? Like
you didn't read a
we
card
read
for
a
the
card
last
the-
month. No,
Oh,
the
and
last
how
month.
to get resolved?
Huh?
How to get resolved?
The U.S. conceded.
We paid Brazil off, which is what the CP does.
Why does that matter? Like we paid Brazil off.
No,
so
we
why is
didn't.
that?
We changed our cotton
Did we read a
policy.
card on that?
implemented a new farm bill
Okay.
that resolved it. If you read a card, we'll read a card
Bitcoin-
that makes the factual
Okay,
claim and we resolve it.
Bitcoin path. Who is path?
Huh?
The first card on the Bitcoin DA. Who is path? And what is BitcoinSportsbooks.com? That's the only citation in the app.
An illegal gambling site.
Okay, so why should we use that as a credible thing for
Because
understanding
they're
Bitcoin
like,
programs?
we're using Bitcoin right now.
Other groups such as online sports betting sites.
Yeah, exactly. Illegal
BitcoinSportsbooks.com.
sites are using Bitcoin right now. Your evidence says
Why
that.
is
Our
this
Samsung evidence also.
why is this not just a snapshot of some like random website, and why should we prefer
Because
over broad
Both the
trends
piece of
Bitcoin?
evidence right after that and your piece of evidence about broad trends say that the illicit economies
Okay,
are
let's
driving
talk about the
Bitcoin
piece of
growth
evidence
right
after
now.
that.
Methods of
You've
economics
conceded
about
regulation
Last
tamps things
line
down.
of your Simpson app right after that. Bitcoin will likely have to overcome its image as a purely black and gray market currency to ever gain real legitimacy. Like
Do you
that
think
is our
do you
link
think it
arm.
has
Like
to gain
how is
real
that possibly a
legitimacy for
negative
lone wolf?
art?
Do you think it has to gain real legitimacy for lone wolf terrorists?
I mean, that's your link turn, and your card concedes that legitimacy is necessary for Bitcoin to be used ever. So
I
like,
don't.
how
I
can you
don't
win a
know.
link
I
turn?
don't think it
Okay.
says that, and I don't
That's
think your
clearly
evidence
the
says
last
that. It
line,
has to
yeah.
be used widely,
Okay.
and our evidence does say it would
Sorry,
be
Brett.
used widely right now.
Yeah, not
That's what your lone wolf evidence is about too. Now.
Okay, I would rather just leave it up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then I'll-
Where was that?
That was on the CP. No. No, that's totally fine.
Except not banks, but Yeah. Yeah, that's
Maybe we're done. 4:50. Darwin.
Is that 2 seconds?
2 more.
4:45.
4:45. Okay.
For me to decide on whether I want to take on it.
It's a big decision.
Sure, all cards.
All right, cool. The order is the counterplan decay and then the banking advantage. The trade impact business is going to be in the 1 and R. So I'm going to be starting at the econ
I'm sorry,
stuff.
can you start over?
Sure. The counterplan decay, the banking advantage.
Okay.
And the trade stuff is going to, like, trade for business is going to be 1 and R. I'm going to start at non-war.
So you're doing DDEC, who's doing defense?
David took our stand.
Did you?
He readjusted it.
No.
I shall readjust it.
We have our stance in
Yeah, your stand's right there. I don't know. There, your stand.
Oh, over there, okay.
Yeah.
I'll just like, that'll be the short person's stand, obviously.
Did you send out the?
Yeah.
Probably check before I send
You can make the whole thing.
All right, cool. Everybody good?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Counterplan not going to go for a permutation test combination, right? Obviously, nation, we should get we should get one counter repeat, one counterplan explain the distort pulse making limited and neg one advocacy artificially inflates the against competitive options, skills, cost benefit analysis, squeeze point, trying to force to see recognize argument interactions critical to good advocacy against strategic opponents, seize point, neg flex outweighs square precision, infinite prep anchor neg often seize points, use double lever positions, conditional counterplans, keep getting neg ground. It's not a big issue. We didn't make debate we didn't make debate. We did not make debate impossible. Another critique. We're not going to go for either permutation to competition framework arguments or reason draw. The argument should not have been introduced. Not a voting issue. Also, that critique card trade. We're going to seal it now. Get it. Economic decline doesn't cause war. Over 7 indicates there's no incentive for leaders to propagate war, even if there's massive line, because they know making the war stop. Economic decline implicitly doesn't cause advantage. UK leaders negotiate them with the set of also way for developable economic situations. Ours will lead to looking at different worsening situation. National criminal investment to worsen cold air when ambiguous USSR. But no, the economically robust studies prove also answers. Diversionary wars. Bomer 2002. I did not offense work the lower radical to lead the comical for 670 observations. So far, the reveals other which made most of the versions such as Bosnia and Canada. Which we remember the party convention war and complicated leaders really people in time. No decline is critical undermines capacity to wage war. No transition war duty. One of the scenarios major plot is based on town economic theory declines. People get part of the humble less winning and research military wars that after aggression never will avoid everyone the two versions of the century maybe relevant well to hold industry solid rights will get possible information economic will be opportunity wars reasons to change economic will lead to one of their national capacity to organize military operations of our surplus well no nuclear winter doesn't cause extinction cycle of nuclear winter today the rest of one dimensional model never the literature of the states so very funded and directly severity high diversity in the sources of implementation science or numbers how some reason to scale that's what called very nuclear winter and to question growth causes war decline of capacity face decreased military spending cause isolation growth of nationalism expansionism that cause draws country to conflicts mean nuclear weapons mean they'll go nuclear weapons mean they'll go nuclear and cause extinction. I'll finish the chase on top here. Chase not even ocean wars that occur often most of the safety multiple wars are other conflicts and safety for the one of the original safety for litigation warfare when states revenue are high they say our data are evidence on the stats here some that does chase down 99 existing by research on into the K-wave and data operations in centuries that cycle number of battle that's your research just your global response like clear depths on the K-wave something more than the research so I think that career was being one of the reach I the plateau the economic cycle of global multi-century sold never get full possibilities of having a serious to ensure that collective suicide does not occur. Now, the environment impact, they conceded environment DA, the only red warming impact defense debate is over. The Sherman evidence indicates there's a collapse of forest biodiversity, oceans, etc. This all of the production of global resources requires an amount of resource extraction that fundamentally overshoots the Earth carrying capacity. Our evidence indicates that the Earth doesn't have the ability to regenerate itself at the rate the humans are destroying it. Warming is real cause extinction. 40,000 potential catastrophic communication literal moving scientific measures positive portal and particular strength level never change the rolling date for your scientific disagree potential catastrophic climate change. The risk of starting against climate change being extinct human species. They say keeping question of the 7.2 degree tipping points. Our evidence indicates that DDEV is currently necessary to solve 4 to 6 degree tipping point, which is what the causes the propensity for extinction. It's not too late. DDEV is able to solve whole germ 2013. The collapse of the magnetic global rate and survey the commercial and other very effective markets. So the initial differential from the chain behavior factual class something other mounting that crash. We could get the advantage humanity crash we could get the advantage for humanity the crash now rather than later the economy be worse than solving the economy. They say Mambiad devotes a negative compound growth is structurally impossible. Mambiad 14 normal must find even if all those advancement and that kind of growth country possible every party national decline evolution causing the new research on the United Arab Group to desperate limits as possible become more efficient. The UEs are here the research also science can have an hour question is under 80% years of the global paper consumption of record like this is in you already regulate use something that even like the double by 75 years efficiency solves nothing well it continues Mambiad's wrong transition now doing it sooner is key to what extinction Kingsworth 2009 here George the year continue money the game we get the right civilizations and take over the false source on your days not because we can sell on this year on the factor well we might all consume culture the culture revenue research on civilization on surviving support we can incorporate repeat your culture this century to like collapse now is guaranteed which makes all the reference will only question whether or not it happens now as a result of economic decline or later as a result of ecological collapse direct response to Mambiad Kingsworth 2009 Georgia graduate public mental CFD efficient tradition of water use of rate increase into the cause of all the trends that they rapidly or these human bodies respect all the ways sustainable moments that leave out of the climate change it's here over the economic system navigating that collapsing because jobs hours short from the hours what I live through when we fall and learn from his class they say there's no mindset shift that is wrong economic collapse is 100% inevitable the question whether having fast enough to avoid forming Alexander Kiss working on the equal to be underway in relation to the production of the growth having conscious rights and the first years of the community back to the world may have also growth most of the primary reaction to the world wants to be carbon is made like say they get economic direction every time they need to direct the system of the paradigm of the economic direction the world's shrinking carbon budget the world's shrinking carbon budget first growth they can win transition wars the post collapse order might be worse than the benefits and the benefits of the chance on the benefits of the chance on transition to post growth systems still outweigh this cards into debate Alexander 14 if the existing development outside of industrial civilization go to death now the collapse everything seriously collapse life without ideals like path and alternative way life you are involved suffering by costly more than less of the delivery of post growth ever as you had as well as by forcing the issue of the industrial less directions that the antithesis of the U.S. was directed by which person to do a new severe societal change to the civil crisis or division before something that the strategies to do the negotiating incentive wisely and class forces transition their evidence about the likelihood of transition assumes attempts to change the system from within which we agree are useless. Our argument is about we need to collapse the system from without. Gallo says in 11 virtues policy isolation economic system models of politicians should build from such a perspective there's little hope There's little hope. However, revolutionary change, preoccupation, the history has a normal direction of a different globalization. Great repercussion, evil, social story can come out, and California's established paradigm, the gap, created by crisis, new stories, offer more convincing explanation to the accepted social story, and the mode of an crisis, creating popular alternative climate change, regard decision alternative, rather than a marginal one class versus transition, especially since there are internal links about the banking system that's specifically key. Cal's 2011 Berkeley's. Whole country 2013, the radical people behavior reforms and the consumer responsible increases the chance of stopping capitalism directing the world of the climate change to the habit by reducing capital and secure carbon finding handles of all options that would have the concept of normal behavior just like these elastic responsible rules sustained plus complicated chaos the crisis finance in times of turbulential as most change big changes in class forces and transition to a mindset and mindset shift is unavoidable. Alexander 14, the deep crisis toward revolution conscious that open space for the deep revision deep crisis will take order with its own way to create necessary mindset the shocking responsibility of transition take out the rational ability to crisis social supporting for radical form is the impossibility political or social inability. It would be impossible to transition back to growth. Alexander 2014 the best dominant go to opposition during numbers and specification always increasing the alternative clear because clear that new paradigm abruptly the paradigm shift economics and related post-growth paradigm to resolve and always see result will think paradigm post-growth paradigms and said the shift lies relation practice changing with the nation nurture and the nation of progress under notion of progress means they say diversion if this was answered above it but they say chase on 2070 that was also answered above now sustainability acceptance sustainability and qualifications as fertility is decreasing that doesn't matter because growth increases in an exponential way which means that it depletes the earth carrying capacity faster than the earth can sustain it. That's one issue. Sherman evidence happens also indicates that survey shifts are happening but that still increases productivity even if any productivity gains that happen as a result of efficiency are offset by increases in consumption or indicates that even if you use new technology that will increase in consumption in the aggregate which answers the next part specifically because it says we have new resource extracting technology we're impact turning that resource extracting technology because it results in overshooting of the earth's carrying capacity space 2014 where we're coming everything in the form fish works in the middles of water fresh water ecological sciences waiting with your consuming resources at the rate of the land 1.5 times you're having to have a radiation from planets the bottom of 7% of the world population higher instead of only giving 5 more planets resource but zero resource trying to consume China is the best water in our world today 69% of the reduction 60% of the gauge with the world paper around the world that oil and ocean that resource being polluted will be largely exhausted. The biggest threat for extinction bypasses all their answers hard to test as well. Main undergrowth not resources running United States byproducts of humans filling atmosphere the gas and heating of water and subject to sustainable human society where everything you can capital when they were only cast on running out planetary ecosystem the over temperature the environment of the earth that longer will be possible to some technology called to kind of environmentally trends once you recognize that trends some already on wall properly back out to every ever based with the sheer rate of consumption technology is not sufficient which is what this evidence is about to make global industrial civilization sustainable. Allocated 2014 the economy thoughtful leveraging research in the midway constant biodiversity was really great is the kind of robust body of climate change the work that see the carbon launches in the future of 40 degrees or more technology and it came out of the technology advances and energy research to continue to grow the system is mineral sustainable thing recycling adjustable problem increases in consumption outstrip efficiency gains green technology Smith 14 if we want to keep emissions below 40 degrees on the road side the question even if we switch renewable energy back consumption of fish minerals and transport to non-population carbon tracks exchange ocean temperature cheap energy non-visual additions immersive renewable scientific and one research jumping like those officials who had 39 scientists for the 6 years of global human drawing directions to the freshwater capture fishery number resource oil lands are on the verge of possibly global funding resource that outstrip the funding resource rate outstrip the capacity humans current global pollution 1.5 times by 2013 and humanity will need to absorb CO2 waste outside of 30 increasing our resource global use of resource use by 50%. The incentive for overproduce always outstrips environmental benefits from green growth. Smith 14 while there may be miracles like some capitalist economy and gains enable producers to use safe resources this kind of production instead of taking resources to capital there is that resource have to do just that instead of every internal use of use of green industry and replace all comes to problems burning out the Amazon plant sure can that sounds like green after all in the US division you expand back to the second that the station gets time and not get down growth outstrips efficiency the most population and carbon produce 60% carrying and manufacturing houses the process and the rocky metals road and other sources of cars will be more pollution even if there are plug-in cars cloud forces transition all types of environment impact Smith 2000 oh my gosh this is Smith, Alexander 14, Alexander growth intelligence on the economy is carrying capacity by 10% causing global warming, climate change, reverse loss, pollution, household erosion, deforestation, water pollution, dealing technology, to the impact of the overall economic GDP over 9% right to 2080. Mark that card.
Okay. Let's read this Alexander evidence. It is also possible that the alternative system that a crisis produces is equally or even more undesirable than the existing system. Nonetheless, it may be that this is the only way a post-growth society will ever arise. If we prove that there is any other way that a post-growth society would arise, why should we take your devil's gamble?
Well, one, our link evidence is pretty good that a global economic collapse is the only way to do that. That was the 1C evidence that you didn't answer in the 2AC.
Okay, well, let's talk about that. We said that it's no different from 2008. That evidence says rapid deindustrialization would be necessary to combat global warming. As your thesis that the 2008 crisis caused deindustrialization?
Our evidence.
Because our argument is like a probabilistic argument about like rational leaders. Your argument is like the economy collapses.
Yeah. we conceded your internal link to economic collapse. Our
We
evidence
said it
says,
was like a
our evidence says that the financial resiliency that was built in before 2008 that allowed governments to step in with a quick stimulus is no longer in place. The 1C Holmes evidence. The capacity of central banks to repeat massive stimulus in response to 2008 financial crisis has been greatly reduced, while the faith that underpins the global financial system has been weakened. We're also specifically
that's
conceding
banks.
your-
So the banking system collapses, which means that power plants go offline.
the banking system collapses, which means that people don't have credit to do things like extract.
Could you read me a
tar
line
shale.
from there that says anything about oil or coal or
This is the
natural
part
gas?
that I was trying to find that argument. So
Oh.
that will be coming.
Sure, I guess we'll talk about that later then. Mindset shifts. So what is sort of this? The only piece of evidence that I can really find about this is I have the 1C open again. Sorry. The Alexander Collis evidence that's like revolutionary changes are often punctuations after big periods of stasis, and crises are often open windows of opportunity. Could you give me some examples?
Yeah, our evidence cites Cuba after it was cut off when everybody started sanctioning it. It was able to rapidly shift towards a non-industrial form of agriculture using local inputs.
That's
And our evidence
because
analogizes that
Cuba
globally.
is capable of sustaining its tiny ass population through agriculture. Like China tried that. It was called the Great Leap Forward. It didn't do very much. Like, why would China do this?
Because they don't have the resources to do anything else because we're conceding your internal link.
But our link was about American bank competitiveness. Even if that spills globally, like why would China?
I'm sorry, I did read that card, so I can't read you that line. A collapsing credit would make it very difficult to raise finance necessary for the ongoing extraction of tar sands, shale gas, and other extraction projects, accelerating emissions. A deflationary spiral could
That's the
change
1C card?
behavior.
Which card?
Collapse solves warming tendency. Like the word header or something like that. Oh no, I didn't read that. You need to read
Yeah,
that. But I just read part of it, a little preview. That was why I was so confused. Okay.
Sure. Okay.
That's a pretty good card. Right? A global financial crash could make it impossible to restart the economy
You're
with
not
anything
even
other than
allowed to, like, he
drastically
still has
reduced
to read
emissions.
it. He still
An
has to
argument
read
can
it.
be mounted for putting
He still
an
has-
argument can be mounted for putting effort into that crash. Oh my god.
Green capitalism, we're consuming everything from fish to forest to minerals. If that is what we do now, why wouldn't people just do that on an individual scale? Like overfishing and burning of forests is like way worse when it's not within an industrial setting.
Yeah, but they happen on a localized level, which means the impact, the scale of them are far, far
It's
smaller.
not even true. It's-
Okay, I'm gonna do
Alright, so this part is about who is and
Miles'.
Yeah, I
thing.
got
Can you put it in his doc too, just so I don't.
It's in my doc too. It's just homegrown, right?
the collapse solves warming.
Miles, the like bottom of banking, politics, regulatory autonomy DA, Bitcoin DA, and then China trade advantage.
One more time. So it's where Miles left off: politics, regulatory autonomy, Bitcoin, China, and then the trade stuff at the top of banks.
The trade stuff's gonna be on China now because Miles just like left me with that, so it's gonna be there.
Okay.
Yeah, just like trade doesn't solve it.
Okay,
I
well,
should have sent to you.
We can
I'm,
just-
I'm
you
gonna
can just-
keep doing
you can
it
just
on
do
the
it.
bank, so that's where it's gonna
Yeah,
be
just
in
say
the
that
money
it's the top
arm.
of that
So
either.
Yeah, who cares? It's just like in the middle. I think it's fine.
everyone wants to give a speech after you or Jeff's gonna bake yours.
It'll be okay, I think. I'll be clear when I go there. If you want to switch pages, you can, and I'll be clear when I go away.
It's just the econ index, so wherever you
Yeah.
put it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's sorry. The that order is regulatory autonomy then Bitcoin.
Politics, regulatory.
Yeah.
And then after that, it's econ, defense, China.
So China, I'm starting with con stuff, then doing econ defense, and then something else. I can move that if you want. You want me to separate them?
Like, I don't
Okay.
care.
I-
Your problem.
Fine. Okay, ready? Global economic class makes it possible to finance the resource extraction projects that lock in warming, homegrown, and 13 classes trying to make it very difficult to raise finance essentially for extraction of partial steel and other research capacity accelerating emissions deflation external page emission but extraction class make it possible to restart the economy with any other drastic reduced emission argument and putting after class we could get the advantage of humanity price now rather than later. I believe we are on the verge of climate change that will be far worse than telling the economy the politics we're not going to go for. There's no Middle Eastern war, there's no offensive regulatory autonomy DA not going to go for. There's no effective water, there's no offense. The Bitcoin DA, their straight turn strategy is terrible. They have no uniqueness. Bitcoin is restricted now due to gambling restrictions means they will collapse and actually disputes all their evidence at the path forward, which is the conclusion of their evidence that they read. It's also from Pat Sykes' real experts, unlike his part of the evidence, which just cites Bitcoin, sportsbooks.com. Samson evidence is the second part of it votes negative. Quote, Bitcoin will likely have to overcome its images of purely black and gray. Market currency ever getting legitimately cross-sectors embarrassing. Bitcoin will collapse now means we control unique anti-gambling laws will be used as a pretext to ban Electronic 14, the imminent demise of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is currency criminal. China's been institution processing Bitcoin. Japan is processing banks from currency ban Bitcoin to produce revolution, starting to be something to see revolution. By court rulings, public phenomenon, intervention, stopping all the penalty. U.S. pass laws and
that, and an online poker gambling apps are Bitcoin. The majority of Bitcoin transactions are for gambling, and Bitcoin transactions are only a tiny percentage of overall gambling transactions. Means there's a massive upside contained almost exclusively within the gambling market. U.S. restrictions prevent its wider development and acceptance. For 2014, Bitcoin amounts to a small percentage of gambling revenues. However, gambling firms are tending to advantage of Bitcoin to trick gambling laws, crypto currency, and the gambling market despite the status of entrepreneurs starting with 50 challenges and legislation. Truly, our problems are getting games like the FTC huge potential of Bitcoin gambling. Progress requires acceptance of Bitcoin as well as legislation. Yes, gambling sites already use Bitcoin, but the U.S. players are excluded. That's key. Walters and 14, there are gaming websites using like Bitcoin, but the U.S. players are blocked. And John announced that it shouldn't accept Bitcoin. Strategy similar to when poker neither one sets policy. Bitcoin will lose momentum and collapse now due to association with illegal markets. Legalizing online gambling is the one thing that gives it sustainable legitimacy and allows people to use it. The Gigami 14 Bitcoin had its breakout in 2030. Now the question is, can it keep the momentum in 2014, or is it the next pet rock signs of legitimacy are beginning? But despite all that, Bitcoin has many detractors still tainted by silver. Some regulators are choosing to ban rather than regulate. With looming uncertainty, Bitcoin could use a highly regulated industry. Welcome down to would be seen to take Bitcoin next same level. New Jersey is proving the only leader in gambling gaming with legitimacy. Any Bitcoin exchange. New York legislators have been pushing New Jersey technical hub for internet gambling. Bitcoin will get a synergy if the bill comes law. High to area New Jersey gambling law over Bitcoin. If you give Bitcoin break first, we spoke love affair. The plan establishes legitimate, legally regulated gambling. It would be the first legal regulation of Bitcoin, particularly consumer protection. That's key to its legitimacy. Needs to access Walter 14, the future Bitcoin's legitimate still funny Bitcoin still currently regulated U.S. government consumer protection laws most help regulate Bitcoin consumer protection. Bitcoin would be much your online gambling. Bitcoin searching popular gambling would have next mark for Bitcoin 37 ability to identify potential value from Bitcoin solution by escalating rates from the industry work with regular developed solution generated by virtual money. The U.S. is key, so all of their arguments don't matter. Boring and 14 Washington will have a huge effect on Bitcoin market. Grass and regulation have shaped the Bitcoin by security U.S. and global financial regulation. Washington will see Bitcoin average the lack of 100% technology, lack of investment connection with regulatory certainty. The money laundering argument does not solve terrorism. Bitcoin is untraceable and cannot be tracked, which are what our 1 NC evidence says. So you cannot use money laundering standards to prevent lone wolf terrorism. Proof that we were the only ones that access that impact. It outweighs Ackerman is fantastic. They consider that the impact as well as the internal link to it. So it flips try die lone wolf terrorism will use CBW now, which causes to turn China, makes Iran unlikely as great powers have to get involved. Widespread Bitcoin enables massive. Okay, case. The cotton suit argument, they mishandle it. They destroy CSM credibility, WTO legitimacy broadly. BD, Kennedy's settlement over cotton raises possibly the multi-dollar credit being under my Washington drag. The case of certainly paying British employment for them to US the towel on pro. Washington, the farmers a lump sum and trust in a way to resolve WTO litigation. The US by Detroit have legal obligation. This erects a flashing neon warning over credibility of WTO substitute cash settlement that they made arguments about in the 2AC ends the DSM and trade. BD, 10 WCB settlement system requires fans to change their policy rather than pay out the damage. The fortunate will end the abruptly chase rates become more benefits legislation. We lost in cotton. The big losers were African countries after Congress gave administration away from trying to comply. They continued our Levick evidence in the 1NC. Any alt cause takes up the entire advantage. Eikenson cites a laundry list of things that he dropped, Bird Amendment, variety of anti-dumping measures, all or drop pounders that they should not get any new entry to in the one area premise or one area strategy based on that. More pounders, global protectionism, sky high, no impact, Palmer 1110, the G20 is 93, new creative state policy team made, putting WTO set policy to rise in 2008, 282 on 48, restricting measures to remove the overall trade response has been definitely more muted than expected. The India all cause also Brexit. Gupta 14 is found within your strength in WTO to relevant India block the landmark argument that would have too much India used to live with deals for stuff without Congress on food security that enable India substance for foreign uses specific goals last India Mars a new law in WTO on agriculture. There's no trade collapse or spillover to China. Roisin directly enters their compliance link. It says that their trade arguments are all flawed since the U.S. has not been able to back out of deals in the past without repercussions. Trade now go to the other page. Trade does not solve war. It is irrelevant. Barberi is fantastic and the most qualified. He's a professor and cites multiple PhD cites the whole era of post World War II. Their authors have causality backwards war French trade. Catching 10 and single trade keys remains weak and it's just the models that confidence is straight strong since results all yielded important fact confidence trade study that guards is guaranteed to produce something by such from the trading keys new it's piece every trade level can going to die. It's been not trade interdependence to not prevent war. Kept 13 African there or if you had based economic relations deeply far historically logically strong economic president war in fact keys falling ready has constant war but any powerful solving condition lost trade as much duration of best trade has to be a source of friction. After Japan relied on the U.S. for oil was reason that adopted our war China's fair trade policy resentment among the United States. Their visual evidence is based on Garthy. That model is wrong, Han. And 12 missing value problem. These attention missing values Garthy's model associated with major explanatory value of market openness thus to a biased conclusion China or involved middle price conflict, but market openness is missing new countries excluded. Leads to bias correcting for those missing value proves that liberalization actually causes conflict. The Garthy's backwards hand 12 model replicates Garthy's capital piece of paper shows higher market openness is possibly effective with more conflict. Damage value very well facing attention funds finds that market openness causes conflict higher. Capital inflows associated with interstate conflict versus conflict is higher. If there are more foreign capitals pouring into a country, capital inflows destabilize the economy. These wars from trade would not escalate. Year 7 was dropped. It says that these disputes will never go to the military level. They're just political confrontation appear to be proven by cotton, anti-dumping, other substantive. Well, there's back to the other page. Sorry, no. Chinese trade war, domestic protest means anti-Americanism, inevitable cross-sections of debate. There's no change of Chinese trade disputes escalating. Atkinson says that that's not relevant. They can see a goal scene that China is rising peacefully and does not want war. I have cited internal motivations and beats their journalists. Fear mongering is the most qualified preferred over that.
7 something.
Yeah.
Or 7:36.
I think it said 7:33. I have 7:29 here. If you're like,
Oh, right there.
We have no, it's just-
Under the whole set, not the new set.
I don't think it's easy to all look at green.
He-
Yeah.
Okay, I actually, we'll keep looking. Keep looking. Okay, actually.
like relative.
Recording. Steven's gonna send out the cards. The order is the China advantage, the Bitcoin disad, and then the other advantage, the big advantage.
China banks. Big one.
No, China
No.
Bitcoin mix.
Oh, okay, cool. Or all of the cards in David's phone.
Yeah, they are. Actually, I haven't gotten the email yet. So
Yeah, I just got it.
did you?
I just replied, not replied at all.
I was like, I have it. I have it. Remember.
Arjun, I'm gonna turn on.
No, I'm gonna forward it to you. Or David, would you ever send it?
Yeah, every time.
Yeah, that's not great. Gonna forward it.
I got it. And not I got it. I did send it.
Okay, and now I have
Yeah,
it.
Miles, you should have it now. I just got it.
Yeah, I just got it.
Okay.
1 second. Sorry.
Yep.
Good.
Is everyone running? Great. First argument to China relevance advantage, no protection argument China advantage, just that the US and China use DSP as political cover to elongate distance, they use their political cover to tamp down their own and moderate their own respective versions of the Tea Party trees. Doesn't matter. India was resolved 5 days ago. You should read the news. It doesn't apply now. W2 is the only question of how China perceives the gas is unique. Its untested nature means use non-applies its own concept. The US has always announced it testified the news was always application of case long given this gas pop out as a single. It's not applied to million fortune statistic gas. Have yet to the same sort of applied to response given this news wonderful trade. Tiwa is symbolic Cooper level. Was most awful to use with the two government to go to office. The shows the shot by sees how high size on the US is. Its action is not person mode of action constitutes the first case of population turns fast above Chester's and Tigo's like speaking on the USC and Tigo's are produced as a transmission to find a main side in terms of reaching around China and US like Scott's crisis sensibility goals from 2013 in case of estimating crisis in East and South China sea means that will go nuclear theater or defense the internal link window evidence indicates it escalates to nuclear use domestic purpose no matter because about internal CCP regime change and anti-American factions gaining power. The Bitcoin is that huge uniqueness propaganda of evidence that Bitcoin is not now yet restricted, but that doesn't mean that it hasn't grown. Our path the evidence indicates gambling prohibitions was driving Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. Now Pathy is an economics reporter, not writing for PBS News, not the Post Gambling site or wherever the article was actually posted. CNN evidence says Bitcoin is growing now. It's capable of being illegally used for different activities and online gambling products. Up Bitcoin Investor National Casino News 1.3 on Bitcoin Cash and virtual currency. Bitcoin is popular in most popular times. Growth surprise many key developments in virtual digital currencies. So much for many legends rather than the online gambling world. Bitcoin casinos popping up. Get away off from your money price before Bitcoin currency or trade regular currencies legal. Online gambling is key. New Bitcoin explosion. Samson 13 Bitcoin. Hash on a price sense. Go to search online gambling. Casinos that links up Bitcoin's already drawn nature traffic and use that basic cannabis push your line cover after US after just for shutdown 3 of the nation's biggest programs and federal gambling prohibition moves Bitcoin. Samson 13 a good deal of money will probably come from the US part. Bitcoin's used online casinos that manages to get around 6 federal laws banning online gaming. The unlawful internet gambling force that prohibits use initial users supply money to on online casinos right now. They're just stopping the institutions failing when it's gambling sets. You see Bitcoin, you're able to certify that very easily now. You don't need legitimacy for a lone wolf if they're desperate for WMD. They just seem to be widely used out. They don't have an insurance about legitimacy. The one is about use. So all these cards about legitimacy are about to try or die for the app because of the status quo. Legitimacy doesn't matter. They say it's happening. Their evidence is happening now. It doesn't say it has to be legitimate for use now. The banking advantage, we're not going for the trade. Impact trade doesn't sell more. There's no impact trade collapse that complicates everybody to get to D. We'll also concede that trade is inevitable, which means that they can't sell D data because there are doubly institutions like the WTO that prop up to continue doing things like trade, which props up the economy now. The economy do prefer loyals based on studies, international and external conflict, self-reinforce each other, prefer evidence or author and doesn't have
That's the warming thing. It's
No.
right afterwards.
Okay.
Yes.
got it. Class can trigger transition degrowth is impossible to go through inside cloud changes. We voluntarily choose 10 constant degrowth. Obviously, thought about correct core cultural inversion, which would consist of preaching degrowth for degrowth, negative growth is known as simple. De-escalate deflation growth, point size and station because of unemployment, the event of social culture around firms, which determine quality of life. Just there's nothing worse than your work society that work to nothing worse society growth without growth is what condemns institutional love, social liberal select of Jerry to recall decolonize imagination D growth possible on the society degrowth. The economic decline only motivates the most violent forms of war tier 10 in battle. There's much like the response to short visions institutions, direct science that are populated in general background such as economic violence is bad. Economic theory seems more violent, most serious structural confrontations where their power started by both sides discontent with their rule by more system crossing the country under economy that's used to follow destiny. I think between time diverse and scholars argue democratically is a great motivation for depression and others so that authoritarian leaders need help or support or to appeal to the findings just about democratic and autocratic leaders value territorial diversions. They make arguments on nuclear war. It's not true. Nuclear winter like in 212 smoke was an even greater half nuclear winter class 1 class fire country water climate bomb nuclear winter theory scrap effects last for more than a decade. As Russia not the only country capable of breaking walls that havoc all nuclear states have the power side correct so the effects of future war be limited impacts be false warming world to directly times been underappreciated. These might destroy human civilization. Treat is not based on direction to ensure the human race not forever the annihilation through global maps and damage destruction of the infrastructure. Now, the warming and environment scenarios first group that requires deindustrialization, which economic decline, not economic decline. They don't have a way to get to deindustrialization because our interlink is just the 08 crisis. Also doesn't mean that China turns off their power plants now. Prefer evidence authors are too short-term and indoor adaptation. Dr. 11, there's substantial regarding the relative magnitude think of it global warming. Climate change impacts analysis frequently took 52 years to future long-term analysis show the combination of economic growth, cultural change over decades. Use negative human beings that are magnitudes combinations virtually limited. Such negative impacts essentially arresting future net damages global warming. The baseline future adaptive capacity is generally estimated as few impacts that is considered technological change. Both assume the new technological come online. Ross expects substantial advances in adaptive capacity due to increase in economic development and technological change in human capital. Also, he can see that warming is inevitable. He just says yes, warming, but he concedes our NPR representing kids who are past the tipping point. This irreversible no shift to emissions can solve. That's the internal link in their one and see home here evidence, which is drop, which means they can't solve warming because warming is irreversible. No theoretical empirical events of K waves, north and contrary to follow no methodology, choosing trend course interface. No wave could be identified waves where idealists but whoever created the chart price inflation set it off 75 years of deflation. So we're still predicting long-term severe price deflation. Some of them we both the wave to prove this assertion. Well, one case the evidence corroborate the wave prices and output are not directly related. And firstly, there is no correlation between production and monetary use. Contrast hypothesis not simply not supported by evidence. Now, the one evidence indicates costs valid in the short term. We should prefer evidence called leads from 2014 in case that their mind shift evidence doesn't assume service shifts and new technology. They probably should have read a new environment scenario if they didn't want us to read defense. No.
Go to the mindset shift cards. Yep.
Okay.
The next block, yeah.
No mindset shift, lock below, and there's no political strategy at the moment. Many people want growth, and so demanded politicians. The Green Party go 1% to vote, and one MP will strong evidence going to be the vision on something that they see their income stagnating. Also, please know the kind of growth is not going to go well. Income growth and make ecological easier, but this will pay only small roads have to require political effort. For that effort will be nothing creative political challenge. Place capitals. No, we can't be on the eventualist camp. This bullshit will not work. And no, back to planetary boundaries. Schellenberger 11. The planetary boundaries have also misleading guide planetary boundaries to reduce biodiversity, loss, hydrogen, fresh water, air, soil pollution. Do not have about physical boundaries, but for all the manufacturers are no global tipping points which function different ways. There is no evidence exceeding results from different facts to different facts. These no threshold cars operate on local, regional levels, not global levels.
Read the need card, the card after Lockwood.
Okay. Growth will follow decline mean 12 capitals not a fragile system will be easily replaceable by huge supplies of bullets here to say single civilizations unstoppable future. I'll be remembers not named for research so to Timothy using foreigners to be able to clear but it's going to make this cleaner plan of politics nature travels ugly not practical billions of hungry will butcher every panda in the zoo torture forced to get the center to the of his spirit inspiration will around the world which people know where the next was coming from the world if you all take off for things like the sustainability of the fisheries of rich energy secure world's going to spend more money to developing solar prosperous world facing climate change will be able to mitigate the consequences and take off for the future in ways that the world will fall by energy and security and grips and the crisis can't and won't do and no limits to growth base 12 no limits to growth begins in new food production knowledge 12 make vertical farm size Denmark could feed the entire community vertical farm size less water. Less water.
445. What? How much water do I have? Okay, I'm good.
Sorry. Yeah, I don't.
Okay. Bitcoin DA, banks, WTF.
My computer.
Yeah, I went.
You're reading cards.
Oh, actually, I'm reading one part of the email.
Can you put it in the body of the email?
Yeah. Well, that might mess up the highlighting.
It usually doesn't mess up the highlighting, just like underlining.
It takes it off. It makes the bold stuff unhighlighted.
Yeah,
I can bold.
If you just F3, if you just like remove all the underlining and leave highlighting, it will still send it all right.
Okay. How do you do that?
F3.
Miles wants to use a
I think we're using different verbatims, different versions or something.
Okay, just send it.
Isn't there like a select
It doesn't
formatting?
Just send the card.
Dear God.
You asked for
Yeah,
text.
Yeah,
I usually send it
I thought it would
faster.
be easy, but apparently.
No. Yeah.
Just try. It's hard to try.
Yeah, you can try putting in the text.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the stuff that's in italics is some of it is highlighted.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
We'll just follow along.
You can ask for it. Cool.
Click that one card.
So you see that faster.
All right. Good.
Bitcoin zero straight term 1, zero uniqueness. We do have evidence that they conceded the Bitcoin will collapse in the status quo and become the next Gia Pet or Pet Rocks anti-gambling laws will be used as pretext to ban everywhere. That's Lakhani, D, Giamo, and Walters too. They conceded the U.S. online lending restrictions do prevent even more expansive acceptance of Bitcoin. Since the U.S. is partnering, which means we control the net direction of the link. Proves that even though some Bitcoin is happening now, there's only risk of it growing in the world of the plan. That's Ferguson and Walters 3. Anti-money laundering, the plan's regulatory system do not solve lone wolves. They have zero cards to back this up, and our 1 and 2 check evidence indicates regs will work because Bitcoin is untrackable. We conceded their internal defense. Our one wolf does not require a legitimate Bitcoin system, but since both sides have evidence on the link debate, it proves that Bitcoin will definitely exist whether you vote affirmative or negative. So no unique impact to the no uniqueness for their impact to the link. The lone wolves are using the status quo, which is what their own evidence supports. So even if they win the direction of the link, it's fundamentally irrelevant because we both established that it only requires like one terrorist getting access to a tiny bit of Bitcoin to be able to trigger a war. Now the DDoS. The trade inevitability stuff at the top one, they do not have any evidence that indicates global trade collapse. The inevitably global trade means that economic growth is inevitable. We can see they're internally the banks are necessary and sufficient to banks are necessary sufficient to both have economic growth, which means that it decreases the propensity for the WTO to exist too. That probably turns our China pact. They can see the trade is inevitable. It includes the warrants, and all of that evidence proves that it includes trade with China. 3, we have links to the affirmative base point. The credit we have 2 pieces of home credit, which are fantastic. Indicates that there's another banking crisis. Won't be enough credit to be able to do things like extract hard shell, except that'll force us to transition towards a more sustainable form of energy. Peace now is different than 2008. There's no limited ability to stimulate the economy. Our evidence indicates the government doesn't have the financial resources to do so. Also, there's no faith in the system. The faith in the system argument is critical because that means that it increases the propensity for the mindset that their evidence is not assumed. Now the war debate only all of this evidence is only based on diversionary theory. One, our ban and our evidence are fantastic. Indicates that in times of economic downturn, resource countries don't have the resources to be able to propagate military conflict. War is caused when a country has a lot of money, which can go towards its military. Otherwise, the conflict is unjustifiable because the domestic population would take violence defeating us instead. 2, it's empirically wrong. Our evidence indicates like 600 empirical examples and indicates that diversionary theory is empirically false. 3, they can see the trade resource wars argument that our evidence indicates that growth inevitably results in resource wars between all countries, which internally turns argument for the war in upswing empirically outweighs a war downswing or chasing down evidence. Fantastic indicates that because there's more resources in the time of economic growth during the upswing, it'll coincide with the decrease in U.S. hegemony, which will cause a massive multi-power great power conflict, which is the only snare for war cause extinction. Now the nuclear war cause extinction debate. Their science evidence is terrible. Our evidence is based on old models, etc. Do not. If we don't, it doesn't cause extinction. They don't have the impact even to the environment, which means the 1% risk of our impact means that it's so hard you have to go negative because infinite future lives are at stake. Even if it kills everybody on Earth but one person, that is sufficient because the impact calculus is fundamentally billion people. Robot Mon 2012 Robot Code, when they gave the estimate that probability for their population 0 be doing 100,000 based on the reason the global level events was taking place. That probability is lower for model uncertainty matter. 0 reason to estimate around 1.5% to be worse. The general term very close to probability 0. I know the 2 hours going to go for a war turn the environment. 1, you shouldn't allow that. That should have been the 1 AR job, right? 2, and our strategy predicated on 1 AR missteps. 2, that assumes that they get access to nuclear winter, which will decisively win because our evidence is better. Now they say we don't cause the industrialization, they cause the climate economic growth. That was sort of the overview. We have fantastic pieces of link evidence indicates now is different. 2008 we have specifically internally turned the abs credit internally. Now the climate now the warming debate. Their climate change indicates we've been able to adapt to the current impacts of climate change. That doesn't assume that when tipping points occur that climate change becomes self-reinforcing. It happens farther. Their NPR evidence indicates that 2 degree tipping points are never our home governance is about avoiding 4 degree to 6 degree tipping points which actually cause extinction. They don't have any internal link defense. They don't have any internal link defense in the same back. So if we were at risk of an impact to it, it's paradigm okay, but it's answered. But they say Mobbiot collapse had a couple of arguments. First, Mobbiot indicated collapse is inevitable because compound growth is mathematically impossible because increases in efficiency and productivity are always outstripped by consumption growth. Or that means that they're often based on Mobbiot is fundamentally inevitable. Where 2 pieces of king evidence substantiates this in direct response to their argument indicates that the collapse that will happen in the long term will be worse because there will be ecological unsustainability, which means that the fight for resources, fight over how to sustain ourselves in the future will be even worse, which means the collapse now in a world in which there's relative environmental sustainability is actually better, which is also 2 pieces of Alexander evidence on the mindset shift debate will if they cause the transition worse, that means the transition will force the mindset because after like 3/4 of your family is killed, you won't have the ability to restart the global economy. Also, there's a link argument made above. Also, their evidence like Mead, etc., do not assume a crisis, which propagates a mindset shift. Our evidence is also specific to that. In all of their evidence assumes the status quo, which we are locked into a pro-capitalist growth mindset. Our evidence indicates in time of crisis, things fundamentally change. Our evidence, the empirical example of Cuba cave, no game on. There was a massive the sanctions rapidly forced them to shift away from industrial agriculture to more localized form. They have conceded also a piece of uniqueness evidence I read near the bottom of the 2 and see that indicates there's a propensity for mindset shift to occur in the status quo. But what needs to happen is a massive global event. That evidence from 2014 indicates the movement are occurring in the status quo. They just need a little bit. They just need a little bit of wiggle room, which is created by the a little bit of space created by the massive collapse of the global economy. Now the planetary boundaries argument, the environment they group it. They can all of their sustainability evidence is based on the fact that we won't run out of resources. They come in that argument, and we still win because we are overshooting the planet's physical capacity to be able to regenerate life on Earth because the byproducts of both are physically consuming the earth of the ability of the planet to sustain us. Water can only take so much pollution before it becomes undrinkable and starts killing fish. The atmosphere will not be able to contain excess waste forest and no longer be able to produce oxygen. That's Hart, Smith, and Alexander, which means that even if they win, the resources are fundamentally infinite. We're still linked to our overshooting factor. Smith evidence indicates that this means we are using 1.5 times the Earth's regenerative capacity in the status quo. We need to experience a massive contraction, a massive contraction growth. They say growth would resume post-capitalism. I answered all these link arguments above, but again, this evidence does not assume a massive economic crisis, which we have specific link evidence about. They say there's no limits to growth. This evidence just says like water's gotten more efficient. The Montpiat evidence we read, the Alexander evidence we read, and the Hart evidence we read are so much better than that. Other advantage. Where do I start?
To start China quickly.
They conceded the compound zero risk of the advantage of the recent settlement with Brazil to short WT credibility. That is the biggest issue to cover. The argument doesn't make it. The biggest issue to cover. So their cover argument doesn't make any sense. Conceded Levick and Passman. This has one alt cause Rex the whole advantage. Don't allow for new 2 hour answers. They conceded the Gardsky indicts. Conceded the offensive argument. The liberalization causes conflict. No chance of war. Conceded Goldstein says that Chinese leaders are peaceful and not rise violently. No propensity for conflict. CPC regime doesn't change this. There's some anti-Americanism is inevitable, which is proven by their evidence indicates there's internal problems, but that doesn't escalate. I can say it indicates that trade wars will not become hot wars, which is also supported by the piece of German evidence we have.
Your timers are long. 1,000 minutes just confused because it's silent one sentence.
Oh, because I didn't start it. So you're here first. Got it.
Sorry, guys. Good.
The order is going to be China, Bitcoin, and then the banking advantage has detail on it. I guess that kind of forecasts what I'm going to say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Domestic political pressure and short decision time to China mean that there's short-term nuclear war. The only piece of impact defense they have to this is the only piece of impact defense they have to the terminal impact of nuclear war is one card that says that there's only a 1 in 100,000 chance that it literally kills everyone. Answer his future lives impact from your argument, but a short-term nuclear war would be really bad. The robot evidence indicates that we kill the vast majority of the human population. There's no certainty that we would be able to rebound or reproduce to the level that we currently exist. In addition, all your friends would die, all your family would die, you would die, you wouldn't be able to enjoy anything anymore. Nuclear war would be really shitty when prime intervening actors would probably solve all other shit, especially given the conceits of our textile argument. That's the reason why you should probably avoid a short time frame China nuclear the home evidence. We'd also indicate that you could intentionally cause an economic collapse by incentivizing the middle class to change through other kinds of budget shift to the bottom movement, which means it's probably a reason why intervening actors can solve anyway. They say the recent settlement means no WTO credibility. Good job conceding two pieces of one area evidence that are really good. That says that first of all, GATT credibility has already been proven, which means that the cotton agreement doesn't matter because the trade in goods rather than services. And the only thing that's up for debate is GATT said is the cotton evidence only a services thing, i.e. can't maintain different second piece of evidence indicates that we have reverse causal solvency because the anti-equal climate is really perceived by everyone and seen as super symbolic. Though Levick Evans are talking about just a conclusion that says that it affects the overall WTO, but we've conceded that the WTO and the trading war is inevitable. Ultimately, China doesn't care whether the WTO is inevitable because they just use it as political cover. And the only part of the Levick Evans that's talking about China is talking about the Antigua case, the Gartsky, and it's literally extended by name. He doesn't answer any of the trade arguments they conceded, and the other speaks to the trade does resolve war, which would probably be pretty important on the other piece of evidence with the Gartsky and doesn't assume the principled evidence indicates the trade talk where he cites a meta study that cites a bunch of other different sites. So the preponderance of evidence says the trade does solve resource once he says the leaders don't want war. There's evidence assumes the current Chinese leadership, the anti-Americanism is within the party. Evidence indicates that she is effective at tapping it down right now, but you need the DSP. No impact to trade wars. That wasn't our internal link to China. Bitcoin, I'm not going for it as offense and concede that it's inevitable. That's why they don't have any reason why the plan would uniquely prevent it from collapsing. In addition, they concede all of our the regulation is good. In additional loan, they concede the loan was quoting the legitimacy. Other thing. Try or die, oddly enough, flips affirmative in this instance. We have a bunch of really good evidence that technology is able to prevent a total extinction from climate change. In addition, we have a bunch of a piece of evidence that says that the consensus of scientists indicates that there is no terminal impact of extinction from climate change, which means that even if some of their evidence uses the rhetoric of the overall collapse of the ecosystem or something, it wouldn't literally kill everyone, which is the only thing that their nuclear war evidence is talking about. So at the end of the day, you're left with two things that would probably be pretty bad, and only we have a chance of solving it. A framing issue. They do not have any way to solve war, even at the best turns war, but it doesn't have a way to solve the specific short-term wars we're talking about. We have a way to solve warming, which means to try or die. They also concede the warming is inevitable. The NPR evidence indicates that a 2-degree tipping point is inevitable. Even if they read one piece of evidence that says 6 degrees Celsius, all of their other evidence about planetary boundaries does not make the distinction, which means something is inevitable. Top of the flow, they say the trade doesn't make the economy inevitable, but the thing the trade does do is resolve resource wars inevitably, which means there are no resource wars. The only possible scenario for war is a miscalculation between China and the US, which means that it's try or die, and only we have a specific internal link to that. The Holmgren evidence is really good. We'll win on no mindset shift, and then I'll extend our the Holmgren evidence gets causality the other way. Says a decrease in consumption by 50% of 10% of rich countries would cause a massive credit crunch, and that bottom up credit crunch is key. No reason why bank regulations would lead to no energy drilling. Cut the entire debate. We've said that we are going to get to the 2008 collapse, and they do not have any reason why that would happen. Now we have a bunch of really good evidence that there would not be a mindset shift. Holmgren explicitly says it's key to cause the credit crunch to do what he wants it to do. The meat evidence indicates that in a world of collapse, we would hate the environment for causing that collapse. We would literally go to zoos and eat fucking pandas. That is a quote from the evidence. The tipping point is also inevitable. The tipping point is inevitable even if we don't drill new things, which is the only argument that Holmgren makes. It will still be burning all of our existing fossil fuel, which probably lead to not having the Lockwood evidence in the context of economic decline. So that doesn't cause a mindset shift. It's from 2012. No reason why 2014 is different, which means that there is no mindset shift going on right now. And economic decline would probably reverse it, which we have evidence that says what they say. We have resources. They said that there wouldn't be any diversionary theory. Diversionary war. First of all, China is distinct. Second of all, even if there's no diversionary war, we said they wouldn't have a mindset shift because they would still be diversionary. The tier evidence is really good. Indicates that the worst and most violent forms of war are diversionary wars because they target small, weak, powerless ethnic minorities, which escalates because the U.S. has an incentive to intervene humanitarianly. Trade resolves resource wars, which means only those other wars escalate. We have abusive empirical evidence that says that K-waves have never been proven, which is their chase on evidence orbits is much more recent. And science meta study and the preponderance of evidence highlight living now, which means the future lives argument doesn't make sense. It's also probabilistic and intervening actors probably solve the robot evidence is really good. Their answer to it is quoting an email from one of the these study authors who they kicked off their study team because he's a fucking idiot. In addition, the evidence just says that there wouldn't be a total certainty of class, not that it would be impossible. Now, the Cochlani evidence does not only assume the status quo, it assumes adaptation in the future. The Mondial evidence, we have evidence that says that they do not solve because the collapse would make us worse and more violent towards the environment. It doesn't matter whether the Mondial piece of evidence says collapse is inevitable because we have read a piece of Conley, and that's evidence that is the most recent evidence on the Strauss evidence that there are no peaks, and the Schellenberg evidence conceded from the one area indicates the planetary boundaries are all hype and fundamentally irrelevant. If there's no peak resources, then the collapse is not inevitable because we continue to develop new technology. The Cuba example is absolutely ridiculous because Cuba is a tiny fucking agrarian country and not China who wants to burn more coal. The mindset shift is not inevitable. Inhofe is the chair of the science committee in Congress, which means obviously it's not a mindset shift where everyone's like, oh my god, warming's a real thing. The rebound evidence, the meat evidence, and Lockwood evidence both assume economic collapse, and their only answer to no rebound growth is that our evidence doesn't assume economic collapse, which is probably a miscalculation by the two and they say we overshoot planetary capacity again. The only argument is the boundary argument that Schellenberg evidence is after their evidence and cites the planetary boundaries thesis, says that it's wrong and is being used by manipulative environmentalists to catalyze fear against warming, which the Holmgren evidence says is not enough, which means there wouldn't be a mindset shift, and their evidence just buys into the hype.
Can you each assemble a document of relevant stuff?
Yep.
Yeah, they.
Who's still here?
Yeah.
Take out the textures and then textures.
It was after net negative effect, right? I don't know.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Yeah.
Textiles, 90% plus.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Okay.
What's up? Oh, you
able to read a narrative in the beginning and reread the last.
Okay, well, I'm just gonna email this. I'm just gonna email this to you.
Yeah, that's really, yes, yeah. We don't know the way to fix it.
This one, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh? We do sites for speech.
Yeah.
Okay.
George sends
Yeah.
one DF prep.
Yeah.
I will.
The one is the same. So yeah, we'll just go and certain stuff to that. So if we do it just like this. Okay. Yeah, for sure.
That's not like a specific argument. That's just like a different, just like a little thing. What does it stand for? Nothing. Because it's on like a couple of. Yeah, it's not like an arc. Just symbols that happen with the event or something. Oh.
So, yeah, I'll tell. Yeah. Like,
Did you see the ones I'm in?
you think she can hold it?
It's a tight end.
Turn the mic on. So
Oh, you turned the mic on?
yeah.
Oh, well, that's
Sorry.
I've already executed the troll.
So 10 minutes from now, so make sure you're warning 5.
Do you know results from it?
We need Arjun.
No, I was just wondering it's 5 because the week before slacking on that.
Oh. Shoot, then.
It just turned 5.
Just turned.
Okay.
So pretty.
I don't know about slacking.
I know.
Also, I was actually contemplating the let's
I don't think they gave.
All right.
It's an excellent debate. I thought it was super close. I voted nay. I had an argument with Logan recently about the decision time and the ability to read all of the cards and really have a sort of complete grasp on every kind of minute issue in the debate. And I was on the side of I think that you can always do it. And I'm not 100% sure that that's true. I thought this debate was difficult. So the short version is that I think that there's a substantial risk of the DW offense that outweighs the AF. I'm not sure if anyone accesses total extinction, but I think the AF comes closer. I think the relative risk of the environment and warming impacts are larger. And this is mostly an evidentiary question. I think that their evidence on the magnitude of the impacts and the importance of the transition being it is just really good and goes into a lot of detail on all of the most important issues, like the argument that in terms of the gamble of economic collapse, that it is worth taking that risk despite the possibility for transition worse because of the degree to which growth outstrips our carrying capacity. So all this stuff, the water and pollution and all those impacts, even if they're local in nature, I think that being 1.5 times our global capacity, that is large enough that it's something very close to extinction.
What about the planetary boundaries not defense?
I read.
That.
I think that the 2NR is definitely answering planetary boundaries and says that that they are real and that they extend their evidence and say that planetary boundaries are a real thing and that we're 1.5 times what they are, if whatever they are. In terms of comparison to the AF, I think that you're winning that there's a risk of China war. I'm not sure that it's nuclear or that there's nuclear escalation, because I think that there's some dampening possible from trade disincentivizing escalation, and that the rise will maybe in some sense be peaceful. I'm not sure that Chinese Tea Party is necessarily batshit enough to risk that the trade incentives. Even if it does go nuclear, I'm not 100% sure that it outweighs neg offense. I'm not sure that there's enough escalation to cause nuclear winter, which is the internal link to extinction. I think that they're winning, I guess I already said this, but they're winning collapse now better on the strength of the evidence that a deep crisis can't. I think that they're winning the mindset shift debate, although I think you're debating very well, that the deep crisis now causes a mindset shift because of the way in which people suffer and have a problem with what happens. I also think that the absence of credit jacks the ability to do the most damaging kinds of extraction and energy production. So yeah.
One quick question about that. Why do you think the AF is that?
Okay, so
when did they ever establish the law?
I don't think that they need to win that. I think that they established, they can see
the credit evidence is if there was a bottom-up revolution and 50% of the global middle class decided to never buy anything again, there would be a collapse. And we were the AF isn't that.
I guess that
we said in Crossix, 2008 recession, they don't have evidence substantial.
Yeah, I think that they said that this is different from 2008 because 2008 happened.
But the evidence, the homegrown evidence doesn't say that. Which piece of evidence says that?
I don't know exactly which card says that. This is what the argument that I think that they're making is 2008 happened. Now there's no credit, can't access the extraction.
That's not what the idea what it says though.
So what do you think it says? That only
It's
if,
that, like every part of that card is like if the middle class, that's why it says like bottom up is key, because it's like if the middle class decided to stop spending, that would create a credit crunch, which would be a really big collapse. And I thought through the entire debate, we were like, we are not a really big collapse.
I definitely got that argument. I just think that like
If we're to work as an impact, trying to have to like concede the collapse part.
they are conceding the collapse.
But we didn't say like I guess we never said that it would cause like deindustrialization or like a total.
No, obviously
it's
you don't,
all
like
this
you're
stuff is
obviously,
predicated
you
on-
obviously aren't saying deindustrialization.
So you just think they had a card that said that the F would cause.
I'm not sure that I can like point you to an exact card. I think that they're like pointing the direction of that.
Do you think the card probably existed? I guess it's something we can talk about afterwards.
Okay. So, in terms of the transition, like, I think a more sustainable future is possible. Like, obviously the Cuba example is not perfect and you do like a good job on that, but I still think like, combined with the argument that conflict based on transition causes people to sort of accept what needs to happen, that that world is better. And then I think that their tech solves arguments mostly feed into the unsustainable kinds of growth, and that increases in consumption outstrip the technological advances and the ability for the tech to resolve the impacts. So I don't think that tech really solves, and I do think the only way to avoid those impacts is to allow collapse. I think the framing in the 2AR about the solvency, I think really should be the 1AR, because I thought about that, and I just like, I'm not comfortable being like, well, like, this is how I think that you have, I don't know, it felt new to me.
Oh, yeah, keep it, sorry.
And then I think that a lot of your defense, including like, I guess in part, this goes to your question about the like planetary boundaries, that your defense largely to the warming environment stuff, I think sort of linked to your argument that's like, they have rhetorically powerful cards, but that they kind of make assertions about this is not a total extinction event. This is not enough to cause extinction, but without sort of contesting the fact that they will happen.
Okay. I'll let everyone go, but just like one last question is like warming inevitable? Like there's never an answer to that in any of his speeches.
Oh, no, well, yeah, I disagree with that. The 2 degree, 4 degree distinction is made in the block, and it seems like you all, like, that's the answer. I
Do
think
you
that,
think that's in all of their impact evidence?
oh, no, but I don't think
Well, so
that,
then why doesn't the impact evidence about 2 degrees make the others inevitable?
well, I think you just need to flesh that out more, like explain like how the inevitability makes each of the impacts for sure to happen and why,